My elder half-sister likes to act all high and mighty. The emperor issued an edict naming her the crown princess. Yet she insisted on kneeling at the palace gate, clad in plain white robes, and standing in the rain for 2 hours. Your Majesty, my heart yearns for the mountains and rivers. I do not wish to be confined to the Eastern Palace. I humbly request that your Majesty revoke this decree. The entire court was watching. She stomped the prince's face into the mud. My father was so frightened that he fell to his knees on the spot, and my mother cried out, begging her to stop making a scene. I was the only one standing at the back of the crowd, looking down and counting the raindrops. The next moment, the crown prince looked at me with a cold smile. Since your sister refuses, then you'll have to marry me instead. My elder half-sister suddenly looked up, and her expression finally changed. My elder half-sister, Qin Qingheng, is a master at pretending to be unambitious. She said gold and silver were too common. Yet she chose to give away the most expensive Huizhou inkstick from her father's study. She said that wealth and prestige were a burden. Yet at every palace banquet she insisted on wearing the simplest attire and standing under the brightest lights. She said she didn't care about fame. Yet everyone in the capital knew that the eldest daughter of the Shin family was as upright as a bamboo, untouched by the world's corruption. My name is Shin Weilan, and I am the second daughter of the Shin family. Same father, different mother. She was the daughter of the legitimate wife, Mrs. Qi. I am the child my stepmother left behind. My stepmother passed away when I was young, and I grew up in the Shin household. The first thing I learned was to keep my mouth shut. Second, don't steal the spotlight from Qin Qingheng. On the day the imperial edict granting the marriage arrived at the Shin residence, my father, Qin Huaizhang, knelt in front of the main hall, his forehead pressed against the blue-glazed bricks, his voice trembling. My daughter, Qin Qingheng, is dignified and virtuous. She has been granted a marriage to the crown prince, and an auspicious date has been set for the wedding. After the eunuch delivering the imperial edict had finished reading, everyone in the hall knelt to express their gratitude. Qishi's eyes welled up with tears, and she clutched the handkerchief tightly in her fingers. My father bowed his head repeatedly, as if he had seized the ladder that would help the Shin family climb the social ladder. Qin Qingheng, however, did not accept the imperial edict. She knelt perfectly straight, her white dress spread out on the ground like a patch of cold snow. She looked up at the eunuch delivering the imperial edict, her voice soft enough that everyone could just hear her. I am unworthy of such an honor and dare not accept it. The hall fell silent. My father looked up suddenly. His smile froze on his face. I was standing behind the pillar, still holding the tray I'd used to refill the guests' tea. The tea was scalding hot, and the steam hit my face, but I only felt cold. The eunuch who delivered the imperial edict narrowed his eyes. Miss Shin, have you thought this through? Qin Qingheng lowered her eyes. Qingheng's heart yearns for the mountains and rivers. She does not wish to enter the Eastern Palace. His father's expression changed instantly. Shut up. Qin Qingheng acted as if she hadn't heard. If your Majesty holds me responsible, I am willing to bear the full blame. That's a nice way of putting it. But a marriage arranged by the emperor isn't something the Shin family can simply wash their hands of just because she says she's willing to take responsibility. My father's official position, my elder brother's future, and the lives of dozens of people in our household, all of it rested on that bright yellow imperial edict. He rushed over and pulled her. Qingheng, have you lost your mind? Qin Qingheng gently withdrew her hand. Mother, I am not willing to sacrifice my whole life for the Shin family's wealth and prestige. After she finished speaking, her gaze swept over me, very faint. It's like looking at something you can just set aside. I lowered my head and said nothing. The eunuch who had delivered the imperial edict tucked it back into his sleeve and let out a cold laugh. In that case, I have no choice but to return to the palace to report. My father crawled forward on his knees a couple of steps, his face ashen. Please wait. Your Excellency, my daughter has acted rashly. Allow me to speak with her. The eunuch delivering the imperial edict did not stop. Qin Qingheng, however, stood up. She changed into a plain outfit, didn't even take an umbrella, and walked straight out the gate. That afternoon, it began to rain in front of the palace gates. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was steady. Qin Qingheng knelt outside the red gate, her back straight, her hair brushing against her pale face. Her voice was drowned out by the sound of the rain. Yet it reached the palace walls time and time again. Your humble servant, Qin Qingheng, humbly requests that your majesty revoke your decree. Your servant's heart yearns for the mountains and rivers. I do not wish to be confined to the eastern palace. I beg your majesty to grant my request. The area outside the palace gates was crowded with people, court officials, eunuchs, bodyguards, and commoners watching the spectacle from a distance. By the time my father arrived, he had lost one of his shoes. He knelt beside her and pleaded with her in a hushed voice. Qingheng, stop messing around, Ms. He cried so hard she nearly fainted. Are you trying to ruin the Qin family? Qin Qingheng closed her eyes as rainwater trickled down her chin. My daughter just doesn't want to lie to herself. I was standing at the back of the crowd. No one paid any attention to me. I gazed at the brass nails on the palace gate and watched the rain fall on the blue stone slabs, sending up tiny splashes. I recalled that 3 days ago, Qin Qingheng came to my courtyard and casually leafed through my embroidery samples. She said, Weilan, it's actually nice that you're so quiet. She also said, if one day I give you something I no longer want, you'll be able to take it. I didn't understand it at the time. Now I understand. What she doesn't want isn't a thing. It is an imperial edict. It is the Eastern Palace. It was also the fate of the entire Qin family. The rain was getting heavier and heavier. The palace gates finale opened. A detachment of the imperial guard emerged from inside. Crown Prince Xiao Jingheng stood beneath the umbrella, his jet-black robe weighed down by the rain and mist. He didn't look at Qin Qingheng. His gaze swept past the crowd and settled on the members of the Qin family. My father was shaking even more violently. The crown prince spoke in a quiet voice. Does the Qin family have any daughters? No one dared to answer. All that remained in front of the palace gates was the sound of rain. My father knelt on the ground, his lips trembling. For a long time, he couldn't bring himself to say a single word. Qisher Xian snapped out of it and suddenly turned to look at me. That glance was both urgent and fierce, like pushing someone with the back of a knife. I stood at the back of the crowd, the hem of my shirt dampened by the rain. Crown Prince Xiao Jingheng saw me, too. His gaze was steady, showing neither humiliation nor resentment. He just asked, "What's your name?" I stepped out of the crowd and knelt down. I am Qin Weilan. My father finally let out a cry. Weilan. He wanted to stop him, but didn't dare to act out of line in front of the crown prince. Qin Qingheng opened her eyes as well. She looked at me, and the faint veil of compassion on her face finally cracked just a little. Little sister, you don't have to do this for me. As soon as those words were spoken, there was an immediate murmur among the crowd. Miss Qin is truly kind-hearted. I don't want to enter the palace myself, and I'm afraid my younger sister will suffer. But if the second young lady of the Qin family doesn't accept it, I'm afraid the Qin family will have a hard time today. As I listened to those words, I felt nothing stir within me. Qin Qingheng is always like that. She dumped the mess on others, then stood on high ground and said, "You don't have to." All anyone remembers about her is that she was neat, but they forgot who had left the mud on the ground. The crown prince looked at me. Qin Weilan, will you? My father looked up suddenly, his eyes filled with a plea for help. His sobbing stopped abruptly, and his fingers clenched the handkerchief tightly. Qin Qingheng looked at me too, and her gaze softened. Little sister, the Eastern Palace is no ordinary place. You've never been one to fight since you were a child. Why would you go and get yourself into trouble? Her voice was gentle, but I heard it clearly. She wasn't afraid that I would suffer. She was afraid I'd catch the things she didn't want and catch them even more steadily than she did. I looked up. The rain hit my face. It was cold. If Your Highness the Crown Prince asks whether I am willing, I would first like to ask you a question. The crowd grew even quieter. My father's face turned pale. Weilan, don't get out of hand. The crown prince raised his hand to stop him. Go ahead and ask. I looked at Xiao Jingheng. If I were to enter the Eastern Palace, would it be to clean up after my older sister, or to become the crown princess in my own right? As Shen Weilan. A slight change flashed across Xiao Jingheng's eyes. It's not anger. It's about facing the reality. He moved the umbrella forward a step, and its brim shielded my face from the rain. Naturally. In your name. I married Shen Weilan, not a stand-in for anyone else. As soon as those words were spoken, the murmuring around him ceased. I bow my head. Your humble daughter is willing. My father let out a long sigh and almost collapsed to the ground. He, however, felt as if someone were choking him. Qin Qingheng stared at me, her voice soft. Little sister, have you thought this through? I turned to look at her. My sister has been kneeling for 2 hours. I'm sure she's thought it through by now. I just don't want everyone in the Shen family to be dragged down with my sister's Shan Shui. Her face turned pale. This was the first time I stood up to her in public. It was also the first time I'd ever seen her usually impassive face show a look of embarrassment. The crown prince suddenly let out a laugh. It's very light, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear. Miss Shen too is more sensible than Miss Shen. Qin Qingheng's shoulders stiffened. My father immediately bowed his head to the ground. Your Highness is so generous. Us the Shen family is deeply grateful. The crown prince ignored him. He looked at the eunuch accompanying him. I'll go to the palace to report to His Majesty, since the eldest daughter of the Shen family has defied the imperial decree and refused the marriage. I will not force her hand. Shen Weilan, the second daughter of the Shen family, is of dignified bearing and well-versed in etiquette. She humbly accepts the emperor's grace. Please, father, reconsider your decree. The eunuch bowed in acknowledgement. Qin Qingheng suddenly spoke up. Your Highness. The crown prince finally looked at her. Qin Qingheng knelt in the rain, her face pale, but her voice remained steady. Your Highness. I did not mean to be disrespectful. Your humble daughter simply has no interest in this. Xiao Jingheng lowered his eyes. What you aspire to has nothing to do with me. Qin Qingheng froze. The crown prince continued. But you treated the imperial arranged marriage as a stepping stone to fame, and the entire Shen family as a stepping stone to your own reputation. That's not integrity. That's selfish. There was complete silence all around. The He family had stopped crying. Qin Qingheng's lips turned pale. She cares most about her reputation. That remark from the crown prince was even harsher than making her kneel all night. I kept my head down. My fingertips pressed against the damp, cold cuff of my sleeve. The frustration that had been bottled up inside me for years finally eased a little. By the time word of the change in orders reached them, it was already dark. The emperor did not see Shen Qingheng. He only had them pass on one message. The Shen family failed to properly educate their daughter. Their annual salary is to be reduced by 1 year. Qin Qingheng was confined to his quarters for 3 months to reflect on his actions. Shen Weilan will choose a date to enter the palace to express her gratitude. He sat down on the ground right then and there. My father knelt to express his gratitude for the emperor's grace, and his forehead was scraped raw. Before leaving, the crown prince stopped in front of me. Tomorrow, I will send a court lady to the Shen residence. I replied. He added, if anyone gives you a hard time, just mention my name. That sentence is very light, but it was like an umbrella falling right on my head. Before I could say anything, Qin Qingheng suddenly stood up. She had been standing in the rain for too long, and her body wavered slightly. He hurriedly reached out to steady her. Qin Qingheng, however, kept her eyes fixed on the crown prince. Your Highness, are you sure you won't regret replacing him today just on a whim? The crown prince turned to one side. He glanced at me. Then he said to Qin Qingheng, my only regret is that I didn't realize until today that there was still a sensible person in the Shen family. In the carriage on the way back to the Shen residence, no one spoke. My father sat in the seat of honor, his forehead wrapped in a cloth, his face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Ms. He held Qin Qingheng in her arms, wiping her hair while tears streamed down her face. My son, you've suffered. Qin Qingheng closed her eyes and spoke in a very low voice. Mother, I've been a disobedient daughter. He immediately glared at me. Do you even know what it means to be unfilial? Your sister knelt until she was on the verge of death, all to stay true to herself. You, on the other hand, took advantage of a ready-made fortune, and then went and stabbed her right in front of the palace gates. My father frowned but said nothing. I sat in the corner, holding a hand warmer. That stove was delivered by a chamberlain from the crown prince's residence. When he saw this, his gaze grew even colder. Chin Weilon. Don't think that just because the crown prince said a few kind words, you've really made it to the top. Remember, you're where you are today because your sister gave way to you. I looked up. Mom was wrong. The car fell silent. He was taken aback. I placed the hand warmer on my lap. It wasn't my sister who let me. It's my sister who refused the imperial edict and won't accept the consequences. I'm working on behalf of the Shin family, not because of her charity. Qin Qingheng opened her eyes. She looked at me as if she were meeting me for the first time. Little sister, you've changed. I nodded. People can't go their whole lives without speaking. He was so angry that his hands were shaking. How dare you? She raised her hand to hit me. Suddenly, someone pulled back the curtain of the carriage from the outside. The female court official from the crown prince's household who was accompanying the procession stood beside the carriage, her face expressionless. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has issued an order. Second young Miss Shin caught a chill in the rain today. She'll need to see a doctor when she returns home. No one is to disturb them. Ki's hand froze in midair. Her face alternated between pale and flushed. The court lady looked at that hand. Are you trying to disturb us, madam? He forced himself to lower his hand. I was just helping her adjust her clothes. The court lady did not respond. She pulled down the car curtain. No one in the car spoke again. After we returned home, my father called me into the main hall. Qin Qingheng changed her clothes and was helped by Mrs. Qi to sit down nearby. Several of the house's matronly servants had arrived. They usually only listen to the He family, and the way they look at me is always tinged with contempt. My father took a sip of tea and got straight to the point. Weilon, although the decree has been revoked, your sister's reputation has been tarnished, and the Shin family has also been punished. For the next 3 months, you must not draw attention to yourself. Before you enter the Eastern Palace, you must still put your sister first. I looked at him. What does father mean? My father avoided my gaze. Your sister is in poor health. If the palace sends any fabrics or jewelry, let her choose what suits her first. He immediately chimed in. And the female instructors. Even though Qingheng isn't getting married, we still can't neglect etiquette and protocol. You're a little slow, so let your sister learn first, and then I'll teach you. The matronly housekeepers looked down, trying to stifle their laughter. Qin Qingheng cleared her throat softly. Mother, there's no need for that. She said it wasn't necessary. But her eyes didn't stop him. I set down the teacup. When the bottom of the cup touched the table, it made a clear sound. Father, the items bestowed by the palace are for the future crown princess. The female instructors are here to teach the future crown princess as well. If you'd like to learn, sister, you can submit a note to the palace and ask Her Majesty the Empress to assign someone else. The Shin family should not be undermining the prestige of the crown prince's household. My father's expression froze. He slammed his fist on the table. How dare you use the palace to pressure me? I looked at her. It wasn't me who used the palace to put pressure on my mother. It was mother who wanted to use my older sister to pressure the imperial edict. As soon as those words were spoken, everyone in the hall bowed their heads. No one dared to laugh anymore. Qin Qingheng's fingertips tightened slightly. Weilon, my father said in a solemn voice. She is, after all, your sister, precisely because she's the older sister. She should know better than to overstep her bounds. I stood up and bowed to my father. Today, at the palace gates, the crown prince has already saved face for the Shin family. If someone from the palace comes tomorrow and sees that the Shin family is still displaying their eldest daughter who defied the imperial edict in the front, while trampling their second daughter who accepted the edict underfoot, What does father think his majesty will think? The teacup in my father's hand wobbled slightly. He also fell silent. I continued. A 1-year suspension of pay is already a lenient punishment. Does Dad want to try again? The main hall was deathly silent. The faces of several of the matronly housekeepers turned pale. They finally realized that I am no longer the second young miss in the backyard whom they can boss around at will. My father closed his eyes for a moment. Starting today, all gifts bestowed upon Wei Lan by the palace are to be sent to her courtyard. Wei Lan also received the female instructors on her own. He grew impatient. Sir. My father slammed his hand down on the table. Haven't you made a fool of yourself enough today? His eyes welled up with tears. But he didn't dare argue any further. Qin Qinghen slowly stood up. She walked up to me, her voice still gentle. Little sister, now that you have the crown prince backing you, things are naturally different. But the Eastern Palace is a complex and formidable place. Just because His Highness protects you for now doesn't mean he can protect you for the rest of your life. I looked at her. Don't worry, sis. I don't rely on others for the time being. I stand on my own 2 feet. Her smile faded. Just then, the doorman rushed in. Sir, someone from the palace has arrived. My father immediately stood up. Outside the door, a lady-in-waiting from the Eastern Palace entered, accompanied by 2 eunuchs. She was holding a silk-lined box in her hands. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has instructed me to deliver something to you. They say that before Miss Shen Tu enters the palace, she should first figure out who in the Shen household is sincere and who is insincere. The jewel box was opened. There's no jewelry inside. It was a stack of ledgers. As the ledger in the silk-lined box was unfurled, even the sound of breathing grew quieter in the main hall. The first page lists the dowry lands belonging to my birth mother, concubine Lin. The second page lists the rent for the storefront. Starting on page 3, you'll find where the money has gone over the years. The dividends from Silk Village went into the He family's private coffers. 2 shops on South Street were registered under Shen Qingheng's name. Our institute's monthly allowances for all 4 seasons have been cut to 30%. Yet the books show that they were paid in full. The most ridiculous thing is that half of the gold and silver that Shen Qingheng deemed tacky actually came from my birth mother's former estate. The Huing stones she gave as gifts, the cloud-patterned gauze she wore, and the folding screens used for poetry gatherings, every single item was paid for with the silver left behind by concubine Lin. His face turned pale in an instant. My father reached for the ledger. The lady-in-waiting from the Eastern Palace took a step forward and blocked his hand. Minister Shen, please exercise caution. This is a copy. The original has already been delivered to the Eastern Palace. My father's hand froze in midair. Qi Shiqiang forced a smile and said, I'm afraid the court lady has misunderstood. Household affairs are complex, so it's not unusual for there to be the occasional error or omission in the accounts. The court lady's face was expressionless. Mistakes and omissions do happen from time to time, but can they last for 12 years? As soon as those words were spoken, the matron in charge of the hall's affairs felt her knees give way, and she fell to her knees with a thud. He suddenly turned around and glared at them. Who gave you permission to kneel? One of the matronly housekeepers was shaking like a leaf. Please spare my life. Madam, I was only following orders. He shouted sharply. Shut up. The court lady looked at her coldly. If Lady Shen wants to reprimand someone, she should wait until she's settled the score with the crown princess. As soon as the words crown princess consort were uttered, the expression on Mrs. Q's face grew even more grim. Shen Qingheng sat to one side, her fingertips clenching the handkerchief. She didn't say a word. I looked at her. Don't you hate gold and silver and all those material things the most? Sister, it turns out that while vulgar things shouldn't come out of your mouth, they can actually uphold your reputation for refinement. Shen Qingheng's eyes were slightly red. Little sister, I didn't know any of this. I nodded. My sister didn't know the shop was in your name. My sister doesn't know where Mo came from. My sister didn't know that I didn't have enough charcoal to keep warm in the winter, and my hands were too cold to hold a needle. The color drained from her lips. If I had known, I definitely wouldn't have used it. I smiled. Well, now I know. Are you planning to pay it back? Sis. The main hall was deathly quiet. Tears hung from Shin Qingheng's eyelashes. Poised to fall but not quite falling. Back then, all she had to do was act like that, and everyone would be moved. But today is different. The lady-in-waiting from the Eastern Palace stood beside me, like a drawn sword. My father finally spoke up. Wei Lan. There's no need for family members to make such a scene. I looked at him. My father was right. Then I won't make a fuss. Pay according to the statement. His father's brow twitched violently. He exclaimed, "You're crazy." Those shops and properties were incorporated into public ownership long ago. How could they possibly be separated one by one? I said calmly, "If we can't part ways, we'll split the silver. If you can't make money, just take things. Mom's been running the household for so many years, she surely can't be that bad at math." The court lady immediately handed him a list. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has already asked the senior official of the Ministry of Revenue to review the matter. Concubine Lin's former estate, including principal and interest, totals 37,600 taels. There are also 2 storefronts, a farmhouse, and 300 mu of fertile farmland. He wavered slightly. My father gasped as well. That's no small number. That would be enough to strip away half of the respectability the Shin family has put on a show of over the years. Shin Qingheng suddenly stood up and walked over to me. Little sister. If these things will put your mind at ease, I'll return them. She spoke gently, with a hint of hurt. It was as if I were forcing her to part with something she cherished. I looked at her. My sister hasn't repaid the favor yet. It's a debt. All the color drained from her face. The court lady unfolded another sheet of paper. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has one more thing to say. Before Miss Shin Tu enters the Eastern Palace, if the Shin family shows even the slightest disrespect toward her by referring to her as a born out of wedlock daughter, the Eastern Palace will personally settle the score with them. Not at all. My father replied hurriedly. The court lady turned to me. Where would you like to start, young lady? Everyone's eyes were on me. I picked up the ledger and turned to the entry for the shop listed under Shin Qingheng's name. Let's start with the 2 shops registered under my sister's name, since she says she's willing to return it. Let's draw up the deed today. Shin Qingheng's fingertips trembled. Fire blazed in his eyes. My father's lips twitched, but he didn't dare to stop him. Just then, a hurried voice suddenly came from outside the door. Sir, we're in trouble. Someone from the palace has arrived again. They say the Empress has summoned the second young lady to the palace tomorrow. He also said to have Miss Shin wait in the mansion to receive the imperial decree. The Empress's imperial decree arrived all too quickly. The Shin household, already crushed by the ledgers, was now left gasping for breath under the weight of this imperial edict. The eunuch who delivered the message stood on the veranda. His voice neither hurried nor slow. The Empress said that second young lady Shin will enter the palace tomorrow to express her gratitude. As for Miss Shin, since she is confined to her quarters to reflect on her actions, there is no need for her to go to the palace. Her Majesty also bestowed a volume of admonitions for women and a copy of the Sutra of a Pure Mind, ordering Miss Shin to copy them out every day. Shin Qingheng's face was as white as paper. Never mind the admonitions for women. Those 4 characters from the Heart Sutra were what really hit her where it hurt. Everyone in the capital praised her for her calm and composed nature and her indifference to worldly glory. The Empress chose to bestow the Sutra of a Pure Heart as if to tell everyone that her heart was not yet pure enough. He forced a smile as he accepted the imperial edict. But the eunuch did not leave. He looked at me again. The Empress also said that since Miss Shin Heir is the future crown princess, no aspect of her daily life from her clothing and food to her daily routine should be neglected. Starting tomorrow, the palace will send a matron to live at the Shin residence on a permanent basis to teach the young lady etiquette and to observe the Shin family's household customs on behalf of Her Majesty. As soon as those words were spoken, the matron overseers nearly lost their balance as they knelt, upholding the family traditions on behalf of Her Majesty. That's not teaching me at all. It was clearly a move to place the Shin family estate right under the Empress's nose. Ms. He no longer dared to use her status as my mother to intimidate me. My father personally saw the eunuch out. When he came back, The way he looked at me had changed. It's not compassion. It is apprehension. Wei Lan. You're going to the palace tomorrow. Don't say anything you shouldn't. I bowed. Don't worry, father. If no one asks, I won't say anything. My father's face tensed. That remark hurt him more than just idle talk. That evening, my secluded little courtyard was lit up for the first time. Crates sent from the palace were carried into the house one by one. Clothing, jewelry, medicinal herbs, incense and charcoal, brushes, ink, paper, and Inkstanesthi have everything you could want. The maids and servants who used to avoid me were now all crowding at the door, trying to curry favor. Second young lady. I've always said you're a blessed person. The young lady's household is short-handed, and I'm the quickest worker here. If you're willing to take me under your wing, I'll do whatever you say from now on. I sat by the window, watching them scramble to pledge their loyalty. A lady-in-waiting from the Eastern Palace poured me some tea. Who do you want to keep? Young lady. I looked at a little girl standing in the corner with her head bowed. Her name is Qingji. Over the years, she's been the only one who would quietly give me an extra half pot of charcoal in the winter. And even when she was scolded by the people at the He family estate, she never took her frustration out on me. Leave the green branches. As for the rest, go outside and wait for the palace matron to sort them out. The old women were suddenly embarrassed. Someone whispered, you really do hold on to the past. Young lady. I glanced over indifferently. I'm not a sentimental person. I'm the bookkeeper. The man immediately fell silent. Qingji's eyes welled up with tears, and she knelt down to kowtow to me. I will certainly serve you well. Young lady. I helped her up. There's no need to kneel at the drop of a hat. From now on, in our hospital, we must have rules and we must also have backbone. Qingji nodded vigorously. Late at night, Qin Qingheng arrived. She was standing on the veranda in a plain white dress, holding a box in her hands. In the past, whenever she came to our hospital, she never had anyone announce her arrival. But today, he was waiting outside the door when Qingji came in to report. His tone was very firm. The young lady said she'd like to see you. I had someone ask her to come in. Qin Qingheng placed the box on the table. This is the deed for the shop on South Street, and the seal from the Zhuangzi. I opened it and took a look. It's the real thing. There's Ust1 shop missing. I didn't say anything, she said softly. The other shop is tied to the public accounts, so it can't be dismantled just yet. I closed the box. My sister just said she'd pay it back. It's easy to say I'll do it, but hard to follow through. Her eyes welled up again. Little sister, why do you have to push me so hard with every word you say? I looked at her. Back then, when my sister was standing at the palace gates, she didn't ask whether the Shen family would be driven to their deaths. She paused for a moment. After a moment, she whispered, you hate me. I don't hate him. Hating is too much work. I just don't want to clean up after you anymore. Qin Qingheng stared at me in a daze. It was as if she finally realized that the younger sister who used to bow her head at the slightest word from her was truly gone. Before she too nodded and walked away, she suddenly said, the Eastern Palace is no place to be. His Highness's protection of you today may well be intended to humiliate me. I looked up. My sister thinks too highly of herself. Her back stiffened. Just then, the sound of horse hooves could be heard outside the courtyard gate. A letter was delivered by a guard from the Eastern Palace. The letter contained only one sentence. Don't be afraid when you go to the palace tomorrow, I'll be there. I held that piece of paper in my hand and felt a gentle warmth in my heart. But hidden inside the envelope was another thin piece of paper. There was a line of very small text written on it. The night before Shen Qingheng refused the marriage proposal, she had met with someone from the Prince of Ning's mansion. Before dawn, the matron sent by the palace arrived at the Shen residence. Her surname was Fong, though her expression was stern. She spoke with great tact. As soon as she walked in, she gave me a half bow. I have come at the Empress's command to help you get ready. Young lady. He stood to one side. a stiff smile on his face. Auntie Fong pretended not to see her. She personally chose a set of begonia-colored court robes. The colors aren't bright, but they make a person look fresh and vibrant. As Qingji combed my hair, her hands were still trembling a little. Auntie Fong glanced at her. "Keep your hands steady. You're serving the future crown princess." Qingji immediately took a deep breath and steadied the hairpin. The person in the mirror had clear, bright eyes and a face that was still somewhat pale, but no longer looked as meek and submissive as before. When I went out, my father was already waiting outside. He gave him a lot of advice. Just be careful with what you say and do, and don't bring trouble upon the Shin family. After listening to that, I replied with just one sentence. "Don't worry, father. I came to the palace to express my gratitude, not to lodge a complaint." My father breathed a sigh of relief. I added, "As long as the Shin family stops pressuring me, I certainly won't let outsiders make a spectacle of me." His smile immediately froze. As the carriage approached the palace gates, I lifted the curtain and glanced at the sky. After the rain, Beijing was as clean as if it had been washed. But I know that some of the sludge won't be washed away by the rain. It will only be hidden even deeper. The Empress received me at Fengyi Palace. She was dressed in everyday clothes and carried herself with dignified grace. When her gaze fell upon me, it was neither too light nor too heavy. I knelt down to pay my respects. I, Qin Weilan, thank Her Majesty the Empress for her kindness. The Empress did not wake up immediately. Do you realize that the title of Crown Princess is no shield against misfortune? It is the face of the Eastern Palace, and it also represents the standards that all women in the realm look up to. I bowed my head and said, "Your servant knows." "Then why did you dare to agree to it yesterday at the palace gates?" I looked up. "Because your highness asked if Shin Weilan was willing." "I'm not asking if anyone from the Shin family is filling in." A faint flicker crossed the Empress's eyes. I continued, "I am willing, not because I covet wealth and honor, nor because I am acting out of spite toward my older sister. An imperial arranged marriage is a matter of national dignity. The Shin family has been the recipient of imperial favor for many years. The whims of a single individual should not cause the entire family to bear the blame. Since your highness is granting me a formal status in public, I ought to accept it with dignity." Silence fell over Fengyi Palace. The Empress looked at me for a long time. "You're actually more level-headed than the rumors suggest." A concubine standing nearby chuckled softly. "It's good to be sober. It's just that having a daughter born out of wedlock, enter the Eastern Palace will likely require a bit more effort to comply with protocol." Those words were spoken lightly, yet they cut deep. A cold look flashed in Auntie Fong's eyes. But I spoke first. "You're quite right, Your Highness. You can't choose your background, but you can learn the rules. If anyone looks down on me because of my background, that's just their own narrow-mindedness. If I were to look down on myself because of my background, that would truly be a sign of my incompetence." The smile on the concubine's face faded, but the Empress suddenly smiled. "Okay. Those words reflect the dignity one would expect from the Eastern Palace." A familiar voice came from behind the screen. "Since Mother is satisfied, I am put at ease." My heart skipped a beat. Xiao Jinghen stepped out from behind the screen. He changed into his everyday clothes, appearing less stern than he had at the palace gates and more refined and composed. The Empress glanced at him. "You sure know how to hide." The Crown Prince bowed. "I wasn't hiding, Father. I just want to know if the Crown Princess I've chosen will be given a hard time." The concubine's expression changed slightly. The Empress scolded him with a laugh. "We haven't even gotten married yet, and you're already being so protective." Xiao Jinghen looked at me. "As I said yesterday, I'm marrying Shin Weilan. I'll say it again today." She gained entry to the Eastern Palace because she remained calm in the face of danger and could clearly distinguish right from wrong. It's not a fallback option for anyone, nor is it a substitute for anyone. With every word he spoke, the expressions of those in the hall grew a little more somber. I lowered my eyes, but the corners of my lips couldn't help but curve slightly. The Empress handed a jade token to Matron Fong. "Starting today, the Phoenix Grace Palace will personally oversee Shin Weilan's ceremonial attire. Anyone who brings up the term illegitimate again is questioning this empress's judgment. I knelt down to express my gratitude. Xiao Jingheng pretended to help me up. His hand didn't touch me, but it shielded me from the scrutinizing glances of everyone in the hall. As we left Fengyi Palace, he walked side by side with me along the palace path. I asked in a low voice, "What's the story behind the Prince of Ning's mansion mentioned in that letter?" Xiao Jingheng paused briefly. Qin Qingheng's refusal to marry wasn't just a matter of being willful. Someone promised her greater fame, but perhaps also brought even greater disaster upon the Shen family. I was about to ask another question when a eunuch suddenly came running up from ahead. "Your Highness, the Prince of Ning has entered the palace." He said there were hidden circumstances surrounding the Shen family's arranged marriage and asked His Majesty to reconsider the matter. As soon as the eunuch finished speaking, the wind along the palace path seemed to grow a few degrees colder. Xiao Jingheng did not lose his temper right away. He simply looked up at the palace gates ahead. "He sure got here fast." I whispered, "Did Prince Ning come for my sister?" Xiao Jingheng looked at me. "It might not be for her. It's more for Gu." I see. If Qin Qingheng's refusal to marry were merely the caprice of a young lady of the household, a punishment would have sufficed. But if someone were to frame this as the Eastern Palace forcing a marriage and the Crown Prince acting immorally, it could stir up a storm in the imperial court. And Qin Qingheng happened to be that seemingly pure white pebble. When she threw herself into the water, it became murky, and others were able to catch fish. Xiao Jingheng took me outside the imperial study. "Prince Ning is already inside." His voice was gentle, yet every word was clear. "Your Imperial Highness, I do not mean to interfere in the matters of the Crown Prince's marriage, but even though the eldest daughter of the Shen family had publicly refused, the Crown Prince went ahead and married her younger sister instead. If word of this gets out, people will inevitably speculate that the Crown Prince's household is using its influence to intimidate others." The emperor sat behind his desk, his expression betraying no emotion. Qin Huizhang had also been summoned. He was kneeling nearby, the wound on his forehead from the previous day still not healed. He was there too, his face deathly pale. Qin Qingheng knelt in the hall, still dressed in plain white robes. When she saw me come in, her eyelashes fluttered slightly. Xiao Jingheng bowed. "Father." The emperor looked at him. "The Prince of Ning said there was more to the Shen family's arranged marriage than met the eye. What do you say?" Xiao Jingheng looked calm. "Your Majesty, I ask that you speak with the second young lady of the Shen family." Everyone's eyes turned to me. I stepped forward and knelt down. "Your humble servant, Qin Weilan, pays her respects to your Majesty." The emperor asked, "When you accepted the marriage proposal in public yesterday, was it of your own free will, or were you pressured into it?" I looked up. "Voluntarily." Prince Ning chuckled softly. "Miss Shen, there's no need to be afraid. Although you are a child born out of wedlock, if you are ever wronged, His Majesty will stand up for you." As soon as he opened his mouth, he threw the words illegitimate in my face. I looked at him. The prince keeps saying he'll stand up for my daughter, yet he brings up her background first. I'd like to ask one thing. Is your Highness speaking out on my behalf, or is he just trying to save face for my sister? The smile in Prince Ning's eyes faded slightly. The emperor's lips twitched slightly. Xiao Jingheng stood beside me, speaking in a quiet voice. "Go on," I said. "Yesterday, at the palace gates, my sister publicly refused the marriage proposal, and neither my father nor my mother could dissuade her. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince asked if the Shen family had any other daughters. She was trying to leave the Shen family a way out. Your Highness's asking me once more if I am willing is simply a way of preserving my dignity. If I had, and wanted to, no one would have forced me yesterday. If this humble daughter had so wished, she would not have been said to have been disgraced today." Prince Ning said. "But the night before Miss Shen refused the marriage proposal, she clearly said she had her own reasons." I looked at Qin Qingheng. "If you have any grievances, sister, feel free to speak them in the presence of His Majesty." Qin Qingheng looked up, her eyes slightly red. "I just don't think marriage should be solely for the sake of family glory. If I am unwilling to enter the Eastern Palace but force myself to feign joy, Wouldn't that be deceiving His Majesty? As soon as those words were spoken, Mrs. He immediately began to sob quietly. Shen Huizhong quickly replied, Your Majesty. My daughter acted in a moment of confusion. She had absolutely no intention of offending the imperial family. Prince Ning sighed in response. My royal brother. Luke simply staying true to herself. What the crown prince said yesterday nearly ruined her reputation. Xiao Jingheng finally smiled. Is the unblemished reputation the Prince of Ning speaks of simply a matter of using the emperor's decree to enhance his own reputation? Prince Ning remained calm and unperturbed. Why must the crown prince be so aggressive? My younger brother simply feels that Miss Shen's refusal of the marriage proposal may not have been entirely of her own volition. The emperor's gaze darkened. Who's leading? Prince Ning raised his hand. An attendant behind him presented a letter. This was found last night by the steward at my younger brother's residence while he was sorting through some old belongings. The letter stated that Miss Shen too had long known that the imperial match was imminent and Di secretly urged her older sister to refuse the proposal. She also said that as long as Miss Shen took a step back, the position of crown princess would fall into her hands. The hall fell silent in an instant. He suddenly looked up at me. Shen Weilan. So it was you who harmed Qingheng. Shen Huizheng's face also turned pale. As I looked at the letter, my heart actually began to calm down. Because I've never written one before. The emperor had a eunuch deliver the letter to me. The handwriting on the paper was graceful and, surprisingly, bore a 7/10 resemblance to my own. My name was also included at the end. Qin Qingheng looked at me, a look of pain in her eyes. Little sister, I never knew you felt that way. Xiao Jingheng took a step forward. Father, this letter is genuine. Prince Ning, however, laughed and said, Of course we must examine it. It's just that my younger brother has another witness. He turned his head to look outside the hall. Bring the person up here. The palace gates opened. A woman clad in a gray cloak was led in. When she looked up, my fingertips clenched tightly. That was an old servant who had once served my biological mother. It was also 12 years ago that Aunt Lu was driven out of the Shen residence by the He family. She knelt on the ground, her voice trembling. Your Majesty. This humble servant can attest to that. For a long time now, the second daughter has wanted to steal the eldest daughter's fiancé. As soon as Mrs. Lu spoke, a flash of anxiety crossed Mrs. Key's eyes. She seemed to want to laugh, but forced herself to hold it back. Qin Qingheng lowered her head, and tears finally began to fall. Little sister, if that's what you want, why go to such lengths? She cried very quietly. It's as if he's been through a lot, yet he's still trying to save face for me. In the past, this scene would have been enough to convince everyone of her innocence. But today, it was the emperor who was sitting in the imperial study. Standing beside me was the crown prince. I bow my head. Your Majesty, may I ask Mother Lu a few questions? The emperor said. Granted. I turned to look at Mrs. Lu. You said I wanted to steal my sister's fiancé a long time ago. A long time ago? How long ago? Mrs. Lu was lying face down on the ground. About 2 years ago. I asked again. 2 years ago. Did your Majesty issue a decree arranging a marriage? Mrs. Lu paused. I continued. 2 years ago. Did His Royal Highness the Crown Prince discuss a marriage alliance with the Shen family? Sweat beaded on Mrs. Lu's forehead. This old servant has only heard it from the second young lady in private. What did you say? They say that a young woman who's too proud isn't worthy of a life of comfort. I smiled. Our hospital never has enough charcoal all year round, and more than half of our food, clothing, and daily necessities are withheld. If I were truly to say that I am unworthy of happiness, I should start with myself. Prince Ning said calmly. It is those who have suffered injustices who are most likely to harbor a desire to take what belongs to others. I looked at him. The prince is right. So I, too, would like to ask. Since Mother Lu was expelled from the Shen household 12 years ago, who brought her back yesterday? Mrs. Lu's face turned pale. Prince Ning said, naturally. Someone couldn't bear to watch it and threw it over the wall of this prince's residence. I nodded. That's a coincidence. He hadn't shown up for 12 years. And yet he appeared right after my sister turned down the marriage proposal. The steward at the prince's mansion was sorting through some old belongings when he happened to come across a letter with handwriting similar to mine. The prince's witnesses and physical evidence all seemed to have arrived at just the right moment. The Prince of Ning's gaze grew cold for a moment. Xiao Jinghen spoke up. Father, I, too, have someone to present to you. The emperor raised his hand. Soon, the guards of the Eastern Palace brought in a tall, thin man. He knelt down and bowed his head. Please spare my life, Your Majesty. I am a clerk at the paper shop in West Beijing. Last night, I delivered a box of old stationery to the Prince of Ning's residence. The Prince of Ning's expression finally changed. He said coldly, "That's nonsense." The man was trembling with fear, but he still said, "I wouldn't dare say anything I shouldn't." To give the stationery an aged look, you have to smoke it with tea leaves and then place it next to an incense burner overnight. The steward of the prince's mansion gave me 20 taels of silver and told me not to make a fuss about it. The emperor looked at the Prince of Ning. Is that true? Prince Ning bowed with his hands clasped. Your Imperial Highness, there are many people in my household, so it is inevitable that some of my servants might act on their own initiative. Xiao Jinghen said. Just a moment ago, Your Royal Highness said the evidence was irrefutable. But now you're saying this servant acted on his own initiative. That's a bit too fast. The emperor's expression darkened, but as I looked at the letter, I suddenly said, Your Majesty, I would like to write a few words right here in the hall. The emperor nodded. A palace attendant brought paper and a brush. I wrote the 3 characters Shinweilan, then added the phrase Old Tales of the Palace Gates. My handwriting is slender, but the strokes end cleanly. The handwriting in that forged letter was similar, but the strokes were habitually dragged to the left at the end. The elderly eunuch at the emperor's side glanced at it and said, Your Majesty. This was indeed not written by a single person. Prince Ning remained silent. Qin Qingheng's face, however, grew paler and paler. I've seen that kind of leftward dragging finish far too many times at the Shin residence. I looked at her. Sis, why don't you write a few words, too? Qin Qingheng's eyelashes fluttered. He immediately said, Qingheng is ill. She probably can't hold a pen. Xiao Jingheng said calmly, If I could kneel in the rain for 2 hours yesterday, writing a few characters today shouldn't be too difficult. Qin Qingheng bit her lip. She took the pen and wrote very slowly. No matter how slow it takes, habits can't be hidden. As the final stroke was made, the hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The elderly eunuch placed the 3 sheets of paper side by side on the imperial desk. Your Majesty, the handwriting on the forged letter is even closer to that of Miss Shin. He exclaimed. That's impossible. The pen in Qin Qingheng's hand fell to the ground. She looked up at the Prince of Ning, and a flicker of panic finally appeared in her eyes. The Prince of Ning, however, avoided her gaze. A chill ran through me. She thought she had found someone who would clear her name. In fact, from the very beginning, he had only ever treated her as a pawn to be sacrificed. The emperor's voice was deep. Qin Qingheng, do you recognize him? Qin Qingheng knelt on the ground. I do not acknowledge her as my daughter. Your servant has merely written a few poems on slips of paper. Perhaps someone took them to copy. I looked at her. My sister said yesterday that her heart yearns for the mountains and rivers. Today, they're saying again that someone has copied my work. Where does my sister's heart truly lie, in the mountains and rivers, or in the prince's mansion? Qin Qingheng suddenly turned to look at me. Do you really have to push me this far? I said calmly. I'm just holding my sister accountable for her own words. She shuddered. Just then, Mrs. Lu suddenly crawled forward 2 steps on her knees. Your Majesty, this humble servant knows of one more thing. The property left behind by concubine Lin all those years ago wasn't just silver and money. She has an old letter in her possession that proves second Miss Shin's biological mother had long been in contact with the Prince of Ning's household. The wind suddenly picked up inside the imperial study. My heart sank. The Prince of Ning slowly raised his eyes, and a smile returned to his lips. My royal brother, It seems this marriage arrangement involving the Shin family has brought to light more than just genuine and forged letters. And then there's the mystery surrounding the future crown princess's background. The 4 words mysteries surround. Ding, his origins felt like a bucket of cold water being poured into the hall. Shin Huizhong looked up suddenly. Nonsense. His reaction was so quick that even the emperor glanced at him. Qi's face turned pale, and he dug his fingers deep into the palm of his hand. Qin Qingheng was taken aback as well. She didn't seem to realize that Mrs. Lu would bring this up. I knelt where I was, and my back gradually straightened. Mother Lu. You said my birth mother had been in contact with the Prince of Ning's household for some time. Where's the evidence? Mrs. Lu took an old pouch from her bosom. The pouch has faded, but the character Lin is still embroidered on it. Those were my birth mother's old belongings. I saw it when I was a child. She said. This is what concubine Lin entrusted to this old servant on her deathbed. There's a letter inside. I didn't dare bring this out at first, for fear of implicating the second young lady. But now that the second young lady is to enter the Eastern Palace, this old servant cannot stand by and watch the imperial family be deceived. The eunuch presented the pouch to the emperor. Sure enough, there was a yellowed sheet of letter paper inside. After reading it, the emperor's expression grew even more somber. He handed the letter to Xiao Jingheng. After reading it, Xiao Jingheng's gaze turned as cold as frost. I didn't read that letter. I just looked at Mrs. Lu. Since my biological mother entrusted this to you on her deathbed, why haven't you given it to me for 12 years? Mrs. Lu cried. This old servant has been driven away by the mistress and is not allowed to come near the young lady. I asked again. Then why didn't you give it to your father? Shin Huizhang's lips twitched. Mrs. Lu choked up. My master is very busy. This servant dares not. I chuckled softly. You don't dare to meet the head of the Shin family. Yet you dare to enter the prince's mansion. You don't dare give it back to me. Yet you dare to open it in front of his majesty. Mrs. Lu, your loyalty has taken quite a detour. The tears on her face stopped for a moment. Prince Ning said, Miss Shin, there's no need to twist the facts. The letter clearly states that Ms. Lin was once cared for by a former servant of this prince's household. If she has a history with the prince's household, you shouldn't have kept it from me when you entered the East Palace. Xiao Jingheng said coldly. Since when has receiving someone's kindness become a crime? Prince Ning said. If it is merely a matter of looking after someone, then of course there is no crime. But the timing of the Lin family giving birth to Miss Shin's second daughter is a bit too coincidental. That's a really vicious remark. He didn't say it outright, but he threw the blame on me and my biological mother. Shin Huizhang's face flushed red. Prince of Ning, choose your words carefully. The emperor looked up. Shin Huizhang, why are you in such a hurry? Shin Huizhang froze. A sudden chill crept into my heart. Was my father so anxious because he was trying to protect me, or because he was afraid the past would be exposed? I bow my head. Your Majesty, I request to open the letter here in the throne room. The emperor asked. How can we verify this? I said. The paper has yellowed, but the ink marks may not be from the same year. If it's an old letter, both its scent and the texture of the paper show their age. If it has been artificially aged recently, there is an elderly court official in the inner court who specializes in documents. He'll know at a glance. The Prince of Ning's expression darkened. Miss Shin has certainly thought of everything. I looked at him. Since your highness has brought up my background, if I fail to act with due care, would I not be at the mercy of others? The emperor ordered someone to go and summon the chief clerk. While they waited, no one spoke in the imperial study. Xiao Jingheng stood beside me and suddenly whispered, Don't be afraid. I didn't look up. I just replied softly, Your Highness. Please don't be afraid. He seemed to pause for a moment. I said, If it turns out to be false, I'll clear my name. If this is true, I'll get to the bottom of it. I won't let the crown prince's household be held hostage because of me. Xiao Jingheng's voice grew even quieter. I protect you, not just someone who is flawless. It's to protect Shin Weilon herself. My eyes suddenly started to feel a little warm, but I quick Ly suppressed it. Because now is not the time to be weak. The clerk arrived shortly thereafter. He examined the letter paper, then scraped off a small smudge of ink with a silver needle and held it up to the light to examine it closely. After a moment, he bowed and said, "Your Majesty, the paper used for the letter is indeed old." The Prince of Ning's lips curled slightly. Mrs. Lu let out a deep sigh of relief. Gong Feng added, "But it's fresh ink. 10 days at most." The imperial study fell silent in an instant. The Prince of Ning's smile froze. Mrs. Lu collapsed onto the floor. The emperor set the teacup down heavily on the table. What a great combination of old paper and fresh ink. All of you do you haven't. Why idea what my imperial study is? Mrs. Lu was so frightened that she kept kowtowing. Your Majesty, please spare my life. Someone forced this old servant to do it. The emperor barked. Who? Mrs. Lu looked up, her gaze darting nervously from Mrs. Qi to Xin Qingheng, and finally settling on the steward standing behind the Prince of Ning. Prince Ning immediately replied, "That lowly slave is making false accusations. His words cannot be trusted." Xiao Jingheng, however, said, "Father, I request that you search the steward of the Prince of Ning's mansion." The Prince of Ning's expression suddenly turned cold. The Crown Prince wants to search this prince's men. Xiao Jingheng looked at him. If Uncle Wang dares to bring forged documents into the imperial study, why shouldn't I dare to search it? The emperor said in a deep voice, "Search." The guard stepped forward. At first, the steward remained calm, until he pulled a small seal from his sleeve. The seal was engraved with the character Hung. Qin Qingheng's face turned pale in an instant. He let out a scream. Qingheng. Qin Qingheng staggered back half a step and suddenly fell to her knees. Your Majesty, I am wronged. But the steward knelt down as well. He clenched his teeth and suddenly raised a finger to point at Qin Qingheng. The letter was from Miss Xin. She said that as long as she destroyed Qin Weilan, the title of Crown Princess would eventually return to her. Qin Qingheng was trembling all over. She looked up abruptly, her gaze sweeping past the crowd to fix on me. Qin Weilan. It's you. You set all this up, didn't you? Before the emperor could speak, an urgent report suddenly came from outside the hall. Your Majesty, a messenger from the Shin household has arrived seeking an audience. They say there's another witness in the old case involving concubine Lin. That man also has a memento left behind by the late empress. As soon as those words were spoken outside the hall, the expressions of everyone in the imperial study changed. The emperor raised his hand. Xian. Soon, an elderly woman with white hair was led in by a eunuch. She was wearing an old blue robe, her back hunched. Yet she clutched a rosewood box tightly to her chest. As soon as Shen Huizhang saw her, his face turned ashen. Anti-gu. He felt as if he'd been pricked by a needle and jerked backward suddenly. I've never met this person. But when she saw me, tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. It looks like it. The second young lady really takes after Master Lin. She knelt on the ground and bowed her head deeply before the emperor. I am Gu, an old servant who once served in the late empress's palace. Concubine Lin's given name was Lin Wan. She was originally the chief apothecary at the late empress's side. Back then, when the late empress was gravely ill, there were suspicions that someone had tampered with her medicine. Lady Lin was ordered to conduct a secret investigation and discovered clues pointing to a former servant of the Prince of Ning's household. The Prince of Ning's face darkened. How dare an old servant make such claims against this prince? Auntie Gu didn't look at him. She simply raised the rosewood box above her head. This humble servant would not dare to speak without evidence. Here is a jade clasp with a phoenix motif left behind by the late empress, as well as a medical record written in the hand of Lady Lin. When Miss Lin left the palace all those years ago, it was not because she had a secret affair with the Prince of Ning's household. She was following the late Empress Fengxian's orders to present the evidence to His Majesty. The emperor suddenly stood up. The eunuch hurriedly presented the box. When the rosewood box was opened, a jade clasp with half a corner chipped off lay inside. The character Feng is engraved in extremely fine detail on the back of the jade clasp. The emperor picked up the jade clasp and his fingers actually trembled slightly. This is something Ah Hung always kept with her back then. No one in the hall dared to speak. My heart skipped a beat. The late empress's maiden name was Li. And it also contained the character Hung. Qin Qingheng's expression grew even more grim. She used to love saying that her name was connected to the late empress. Now, the word fate felt like a resounding slap across her face. Auntie Gu continued. After Lady Lin delivered the evidence out of the palace, she was hunted down. At the time, Magistrate Shin was patrolling the city on imperial orders when he rescued her. His Majesty had Lady Lin temporarily reside at the Shin residence as a concubine to ensure that the information did not leak. I slowly turned my gaze toward Shin Huizhang. Does Dad know? Shin Huizhang's lips trembled. The Emperor said coldly. He cannot bring himself to say it. So I will say it for him. Shin Huizhang. It was because of your service in saving Lin Wan all those years ago that I promoted you to a position in the capital. I told you to protect her. Not to leave her in the inner quarters to be mistreated by others. Shin Huizhang was lying face down on the ground. I am guilty. It felt as if something were pressing heavily on my chest. It turns out that the concubine wasn't a helpless, dependent woman after all. She had once investigated a case for the late empress, had been entrusted with a mission by the emperor, and had entered the Shin residence with a host of secrets. But after her death, her dowry was seized, and her children were treated with contempt. And Shin Huizhang knew this full well. Madam, he suddenly cried out in a shrill voice. Your Majesty, I had no idea. The master never mentioned that the Lin family had such a background. Auntie Gu looked at her. The lady does not know Lady Lin's background, but she does know that she possesses some of the late empress's personal belongings. 12 years ago, the lady sent people to search Master Lin's courtyard. If you can't find the jade clasp, then drive this old servant out of the mansion. All the color drained from his face. Qin Qingheng whispered. Mother. He hurriedly grabbed her sleeve. Qingheng. Mother did all this for you. That one sentence was more terrifying than a confession. The emperor's gaze turned to Qin Qingheng. For her. Qin Qingheng shuddered and immediately knelt, bowing her head. Your Majesty. I don't know. I truly do not know. Your Majesty. Auntie Gu suddenly pulled a piece of old paper from her sleeve. Miss Shin may not be aware of Master Lin's identity, but she knows that the shop on South Street was left to the second young lady by Master Lin. Because 3 years ago, she signed a deed of exchange with her own hand. A guard from the Eastern Palace took the worn piece of paper and presented it at the imperial desk. The elderly eunuch took a single glance and said, There is indeed Qin Qingheng's private seal on it. Qin Qingheng looked up suddenly. My mother made me sign it. I looked at her. When you signed the contract, didn't you ask where the goods came from? Tears rolled down her cheeks. I thought it was just a public school store. I said softly. So my sister's pride is limited to not asking where things come from. Prince Ning suddenly let out a laugh. Your Imperial Highness, the Shin family's domestic affairs are a mess. I do not wish to meddle in them, but since the Lin family is implicated in the former empress's old case, the matter of second Miss Shin entering the Eastern Palace should be postponed. Xiao Jingheng took a step forward. Is Uncle Wang in such a hurry to postpone the marriage because he's afraid that once she enters the Eastern Palace, the investigation into the old case will move even faster? The Prince of Ning's eyes hardened. The Emperor, however, slammed the jade clasp down hard on the imperial desk. Check. Start by examining the late Empress's medical records. Start by examining the Shin family's old accounts. Start by examining every letter exchanged between the Prince of Ning's mansion and Qin Qingheng. Qin Qingheng's legs gave way, and she slumped to the ground. But Auntie Gu looked up again, her voice hoarse. Your Majesty, this humble servant has one more thing to report. Before she passed away, Lady Lin said that if the second young lady ever entered the Eastern Palace, under no circumstances should she be allowed to touch the bronze mirror in the East Warm Chamber of Funi Palace. My heart skipped a beat. At that moment, the Empress's expression changed as well. The bronze mirror in the East Warm Chamber of Funi Palace is an heirloom from the palace. When I stepped out of the imperial study, it was still light out. Yet the palace walls seemed to be shrouded in a layer of shadow. Xiao Jingheng stood by my side. He didn't press Auntie Gu for an explanation of what she had said. But I spoke first. Does your highness know about that bronze mirror? He slowed his pace a little. I know. When the late empress was still alive, that mirror was always displayed in the East Warm Chamber. Later, she passed away from illness, and the Empress Dowager took up residence in Fanny Palace. She had originally intended to remove the old furnishings, but the emperor ordered them to remain. I looked down the long palace avenue ahead of me. Why can't I touch it? Xiao Jingheng whispered. Maybe there's something hidden inside. Maybe it contains something that would keep a lot of people awake at night. My heart sank. Then I definitely want to see it. He stopped in his tracks and turned to look at me. Qin Weilan. You don't have to take on all the burdens yourself. I looked up. His Highness said yesterday that he was marrying Qin Weilan. Then Qin Weilan can't just hide behind his Highness. He looked at me for a long time, and the hint of coldness in his eyes slowly melted away. Okay. Then I'll watch it with you. In the Fanny Palace. The Empress was already waiting. The smile that had been on her face was gone, leaving only a deep sense of exhaustion. As soon as Lady Gu mentioned the bronze mirror, I knew there were some old matters that could no longer be suppressed. I knelt down. If your highness does not wish it, I shall not look. The Empress shook her head. It's not that I don't want to. It is I who fear that once you've read this, you'll realize that the path to the Eastern Palace is even harder than you imagined. She ordered someone to open the East Warm Chamber. Although the house had been unoccupied for many years, it was spotless. The bronze mirror stood by the window. Its surface was dim, and intricate phoenix patterns were engraved on the back. The Empress walked over herself and fumbled around beneath the mirror frame for a moment. Suddenly, there was a soft click, and a hidden compartment popped open on the back of the mirror. There is no gold or silver in the secret compartment, just a single roll of thin silk. Just as the Empress was about to reach out, Xiao Jingheng stopped her first. Mother, let your son handle this. He took out the silk scroll and unfolded it. The writing on it has faded, but it is still legible. That was written in the late Empress's own hand. What she wrote was neither a love poem nor a farewell note. Rather, it is a list of prescriptions. At the very bottom of the list were clearly listed the former title of the Prince of Ning's birth mother, as well as the names of several imperial court physicians. Further down, there's one more sentence. Should I pass away, Lin Wan is to leave the palace with her identification, and Xin Huizhang is to protect her. If Ruolin has a daughter one day, may she live a life of peace and never enter the palace walls. My fingers clenched tightly. It turns out that what my stepmother ultimately wanted to give me wasn't wealth and prestige. It is the peace that comes from being far away from this palace city. Suddenly, I felt a little short of breath. Xiao Jingheng reached out to support me, his palm firmly cradling my arm through my sleeve. A ripple. I paused for a moment. I'm fine. The Empress's eyes were slightly red. The late Empress had a past relationship with me. After I entered the palace, I looked into the circumstances of her death. But the trail ends with Lin Wan. I always thought Lin Wan had betrayed her master and fled. She looked at me, her voice dropping slightly. It is I who have wronged your mother. I shook my head. It's not your highness's fault. Those who steal medicine, those who forge letters, and those who remain silent even though they know the truth. No sooner had he finished speaking than Matron Fang's voice suddenly rang out from outside. Your Majesty, a message has arrived from the imperial study. The steward of the Prince of Ning's mansion attempted to bite his tongue while being escorted but failed. After being rescued, he changed his story. He said it was all at the instigation of Miss Shen and had nothing to do with the Prince of Ning. The Empress gave a cold laugh. He sure knows how to sacrifice a rook. Xiao Jingheng put the silk scroll away. Qin Qingheng is now the one they've put forward to take tea. Heat. As long as she confesses to everything, Prince Ning will be able to clear his name. I recalled the sight of Qin Qingheng kneeling in the rain. At the time, she probably thought that by kneeling, she could earn a spotless reputation throughout the capital. Now that his good name is gone, he must also bear the blame for the Prince of Ning's crimes. That's ridiculous. But the most ridiculous thing in the world is that, even now, She still doesn't necessarily think she was wrong, the Empress said. His Majesty has ordered that Shin Qingheng be temporarily detained in a side hall of the palace for questioning. Mrs. Shin is confined to the Shin residence. Shin Huizhang has been suspended pending an investigation. I don't feel any satisfaction. There is only one kind of cold, the kind the tea comes when the dust is finally swept away. Xiao Jingheng looked at me. Do you want to go see her? I was silent for a moment. I want to. In the side hall, Shin Qingheng sat on the floor, her hair loose and her plain robe wrinkled. When she saw me, she froze for a moment, then smiled. Are you satisfied now? I was standing at the door. If my sister asks me if I'm satisfied, she'd be better off asking herself first if she has any regrets. She slowly stood up. What do I regret? I just want to choose my own path. If you hadn't accepted the imperial decree in public, how could things have turned out this way? I looked at her. Why do you have to trample on the Shin family to get where you're going? Why should your freedom come at the cost of my and my stepmother's good name? Her face turned pale. I didn't mean to hurt you. I took a step closer. Who wrote the fake letter? She bit her lip. I just wrote a few lines. Who hired Mrs. Liu? She looked away. I didn't know the Prince of Ning's household would use her this way. What about the seal with the character hung on it? She finally fell silent. I said softly, Sister, you keep saying you're innocent at every turn, but your shadow is with me every step of the way. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Qin Weilon, you've clearly already won. The Crown Prince protects you. The Empress acknowledges you. And even the late Empress's belongings are on your side. Why won't you just leave me alone? I looked at her and suddenly felt both pity and hatred for her. Because what you want isn't to be let off the hook. What you want is for everyone to forget what you've done. She looked up suddenly. Suddenly. The sound of hurried footsteps rang out from outside the hall. Auntie Fong burst in, her voice barely audible. Your Highness, young lady, the Prince of Ning has entered the Taiji Hall. He presented another secret edict from the late Empress, stating that the Crown Prince was not His Majesty's biological son. The Crown Prince is not His Majesty's biological son. As soon as those words were spoken, the side hall seemed to be frozen solid by a sudden frost. Qin Qingheng was taken aback at first. But then a glimmer of light appeared in her eyes. She quickly suppressed that glimmer. But I saw it clearly. She's still waiting for a turnaround. Even if this reversal were to drag the entire court into the abyss. Xiao Jingheng's expression remained unchanged. He just turned and walked out. I followed right behind him. At the entrance to the side hall, the palace attendants sent by the Empress had already prepared a palanquin. Xiao Jingheng glanced at me. Stay at Fengyi Palace. I shook my head. Your Highness just said we'd watch it together. It's about time we went together. His brow twitched slightly. It's going to be an awkward eating in the Tai Chi Hall. I said. The rain outside the palace gates is cold, too. But I stopped. He finally reached out and helped me into the palanquin. Then let's go together. The Tai Chi Hall was brightly lit. The Emperor sat on his throne, his expression frighteningly somber. The Prince of Ning knelt in the hall, holding a long, gilded box in his hands. Inside the box lay a so-called secret imperial edict. Several elderly princes from the royal family were also urgently summoned to the palace, each with a grave expression on his face. As we entered the hall, the Prince of Ning was saying in a low voice, Your Imperial Highness, I am unwilling to believe this. But as the late Empress's personal belongings continue to surface, unless we get to the bottom of this, it will be difficult to put the imperial family's minds at ease. The Emperor looked at Xiao Jingheng. You're here. Xiao Jingheng knelt and bowed. Your humble son is here. The Emperor's gaze lingered on him, not wavering for a long time. In that moment, it suddenly dawned on me, regardless of whether the secret edict is genuine or not, it has harmed more than just the Crown Prince, and there was the trust that had developed over many years between the Emperor and his son. The Prince of Ning wasn't looking for an answer. What he wanted was a crack. As soon as a crack appears, the Eastern Palace will be shaken. The Empress arrived as well. She did not ride in the imperial palanquin. but was simply escorted into the hall by Matron Fong. "Your Majesty, I humbly request to verify the imperial edict in public." Prince Ning looked up. The Empress certainly remains calm. The Empress looked at him coldly. "I raised the crown prince myself, so of course I remain calm." As for Prince Ning, today he first used the Shin family's daughter as a weapon, and then used the late Empress as a shield. "You show such disrespect toward the deceased, aren't you afraid you'll dream about her at night?" The Prince of Ning's expression stiffened slightly. The Emperor raised his hand. "Check." The chief eunuch of the inner court, a senior official of the Imperial Household Bureau, and the clerk of the Imperial Secretariat stepped forward together. The secret edict was written on silk from the old palace, and the seal looked authentic. The clerk studied the document for a long time, his expression growing increasingly somber. A smile slowly spread across Prince Ning's lips. Yet my heart was unusually calm. Because he was in such a hurry. Someone who dared to send even old paper and fresh ink to the imperial study might well take another gamble. I suddenly spoke up. "Your Majesty, I have a question." Prince Ning looked at me with a cold, menacing gaze. "We're discussing the imperial family's lineage in the Tai Chi Hall. How dare second mission interrupt?" Xiao Jingheng said calmly. "She is my future crown princess. Since the Eastern Palace has been defiled, she naturally has the right to ask." The Emperor glanced at me. "Ask." I looked at the secret edict. If this edict was truly left by the late Empress on her deathbed, why wasn't it handed over to His Majesty? To the Imperial Household Department, or to a trusted court lady? And of all people, it ended up in the hands of the Prince of Ning. Of all people, all these years later, Prince Ning said, "A longtime servant of the late Empress passed this on to me through various intermediaries. And it has only just come into my possession today." I asked again, "Who is that old man?" Prince Ning paused for a moment. "Deceased." "When did he pass away?" 3 years ago. I nodded. "A man who died 3 years ago only delivered the items to the prince today. The path between the mortal and spirit realms at the prince's mansion is actually more open than the palace gates." An elderly prince in the hall couldn't help but cough. "The Prince of..." Ning looked grim. A hint of coldness flashed across the Emperor's eyes. I continued. "I would also like to ask the court musician to take a look. Doesn't the phoenix seal on the secret edict seem to be missing a small notch?" The Empress suddenly turned to look at me. Xiao Jingheng also glanced sideways. I whispered. "Half a corner is missing from the phoenix pattern jade clasp that belonged to the late Empress. If she sealed the edict with the phoenix seal as she lay on her deathbed, there should be a very fine crack along the edge of the seal paste. But the phoenix seal on this imperial edict is in perfect condition." The clerk immediately bent down to take a closer look. A moment later, beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. "Your Majesty, second young lady Shin is quite right. This seal definitely has no cracks." The Emperor's expression turned completely cold. But the Prince of Ning suddenly smiled. "Miss Shin is very intelligent. I really did underestimate you." He slowly stood up. The palace guards immediately drew their swords. But Prince Ning remained unflustered. "But do you really think I brought only one secret edict with me today?" He raised his hand and clapped 3 times. Outside the Tai Chi Hall, a sharp whistle suddenly rang out. Immediately afterward, flames shot skyward from the direction of the palace gates. An imperial guard stumbled into the hall. "Your Majesty, there's trouble. The garrison at Donghua Gate has mutinied. Some people, citing the late Empress Dowager's will, are calling for the crown prince to be deposed and for the court to be purged of corrupt officials." As flames erupted at Donghuimen, the expressions of everyone in the Hall of Supreme Harmony changed. The Prince of Ning, however, gave a very faint smile. "Your Imperial Highness, look, the Imperial clan and the Imperial Guard are all waiting for the truth." The Emperor looked at him coldly. "The truth? You led troops to force the Emperor's hand and you have the nerve to talk about the truth." Prince Ning stopped laughing. "My younger brother is merely seeking justice for the late Empress." Xiao Jingheng took a half step forward, shielding me behind him. His voice was steady. "Uncle Wang, perhaps you should save that for when we're at the Imperial Household Department." Prince Ning looked out of the hall. The crown prince can barely save himself right now, and yet he's still trying to protect a concubine's daughter from the Shin family. Unfortunately, none of you will ever leave the Tai Chi Hall. The sound of swords and armor outside the hall grew louder and louder. Several of the elder princes from the clan had already lost their composure. The empress, however, stood perfectly straight. Prince of Ning, do you realize what a crime it is to dare to deploy troops within the palace? Prince Ning gave a cold laugh. It's just a case of the victor writing history. No sooner had he finished speaking than a squad of men clad in Imperial Guard armor suddenly burst into the hall. The leader held a torch aloft and shouted, "Purge the court of corrupt officials." The Imperial Guard standing by the Emperor's side immediately stepped forward to greet him. The blades clashed, sending sparks flying. Xiao Jingheng shielded me as we retreated. He whispered, "Don't stray more than 3 steps from me." I nodded. "Your Highness, please don't just focus on protecting me." Amid the chaos, he glanced at me. "If I can't protect you, protecting this world would be half as meaningful." My heart skipped a beat. But now is not the time for romantic entanglements. The Prince of Ning's men were clearly well prepared. Instead of charging straight at the Emperor, they split off a small group to head for the side gate. I looked in that direction and suddenly remembered that the side gate of the Tai Chi Hall led to the Imperial Library. The silk fabrics, medical records, and old items examined today are all being temporarily stored over there. I immediately said, "Your Highness, they're trying to destroy the evidence." Xiao Jingheng's expression darkened. "Anti-Fong, protect the Empress Dowager." After he finished speaking, he drew the long sword handed to him by a guard and led his men toward the side gate. I tried to keep up, but the Empress grabbed my wrist. "Wei Lan, stay by my side." I looked over toward the side door. Xiao Jingheng clashed with the rebel forces, his sword gleaming like cold snow. He was usually dignified and refined, but at that moment, his sharp edge was fully on display. Prince Ning clearly hadn't expected him to intercept the person himself. He turned to the Emperor, his tone suddenly turning icy. "Is my royal brother still unwilling to write the abdication edict?" The Emperor suddenly smiled. "Do you really think I'm trapped by you today?" The Prince of Ning's expression changed slightly. A rhythmic clatter of footsteps could be heard again outside the hall. This time, it wasn't the rebels. They were members of the Yulin Guard clad in black armor. The commander-in-chief at the head of the troops declared in a loud voice, "I am acting on His Majesty's secret orders to root out the rebels." Prince Ning suddenly turned around. "Aren't you guys in Xianying?" The Emperor said calmly. "If I hadn't let you think the western camp was vulnerable, how could you have pulled out all the spies you planted in the palace?" The Prince of Ning's expression finally changed. Xiao Jingheng knocked the torch out of the rebel leader's hand with a single sword stroke. The torch rolled onto the ground, illuminating the man's face. When I saw it clearly, my breath caught in my throat. That man turned out to be the former head of security at the Shin residence. The He family had sent him away 3 years ago, claiming he was returning to his hometown to recuperate. Yet now he has appeared in the Hall of Supreme Harmony wearing the armor of the Imperial Guard. The Emperor had obviously seen it as well. "Qin Huizhang, the people in your household are quite capable." Qin Huizhang knelt on the ground, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. "Your Majesty, I do not know, I truly do not know." He had long since turned pale. I looked at her. "Don't you know either, ma'am?" His lips turned pale. "I just asked him to leave the estate. I didn't know he would enter the Prince of Ning's mansion." Prince Ning suddenly snapped. "You good for nothing." Seeing that things were taking a turn for the worse, the head guard actually pulled a signal arrow from his robe. Xiao Jingheng acted with lightning speed, bringing the tip of his sword down, but the signal arrow had already flown out the palace gates, skimming the ground. A piercing screech cut through the night sky. The Emperor's expression darkened. The commander of the Imperial Guard burst in. "Your Majesty, most of the rebels at Donghua Gate have been subdued, but there's a fire in the direction of Feni Palace." 2. I suddenly looked at the Queen. The Empress's face turned pale. "The East Warm Chamber." Xiao Jingheng grabbed my wrist. "Let's go." I followed him as he rushed out of the Tai Chi Hall. Behind him, Prince Ning suddenly burst out laughing. "Crown Prince, Can you protect the imperial city and all the truths left behind by her mother? The glow from Fengyi Palace lit up half the night sky. The palace attendants rushed back and forth carrying buckets of water, but dared not wander into the east warm chamber. That room contained the late empress's personal belongings, and no one could bear the blame for damaging them. When the empress arrived, she nearly lost her balance. Auntie Fong supported her, her voice trembling. Your Highness. The outer door of the east warm pavilion has been bolted from the inside. Xiao Jingheng immediately said, break down the door. The guards used a wooden beam to break down the door. Once, twice, and on the third blow, the door burst open with a crash. Thick smoke billowed out. I coughed twice because I choked. Xiao Jingheng raised his sleeve to shield me. You're outside. I grabbed his sleeve. If there's a secret compartment inside, others might not know where it is. He furrowed his brow. I whispered, Your Highness. I can't just stand outside and wait while this is happening to my stepmother. He looked at me for a moment, then finally nodded. Stay close to me. We bent down and entered the east warm chamber. The fire inside the house wasn't very big, but it burned in a particularly tricky way. A fire broke out behind the mirror frame. Clearly, someone was heading straight for the secret compartment. Xiao Jingheng kicked the burning screen aside. I rushed over to the bronze mirror and felt for the mechanism beneath the frame. The hidden compartment had already been pried open. It's empty inside. My heart sank suddenly. The SILK scroll is missing. Xiao Jingheng's gaze was cold and sharp. I handed it over to His Majesty for safekeeping earlier in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. I was taken aback for a moment. He looked at me. I didn't leave the real thing here. It turns out he had already made arrangements. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I noticed another thin panel deep inside the secret compartment. The edges of the thin sheet were curled up by the heat. I reached out to touch it. Xiao Jingheng immediately took my hand. It's hot. He pried open the thin panel with the tip of his sword. To his surprise, a tiny silver tube fell out of it. The silver pipe rolled to my feet, blackened by cigarette ash. Xiao Jingheng picked it up and tucked it into his sleeve. Suddenly, someone outside shouted, Your Highness. The beams are about to collapse. He put his arm around my shoulder and led me back outside. A piece of burning wood fell, landing right behind us. A wave of heat washed over me from behind. I stumbled, and Xiao Jingheng pulled me forcefully into his arms. His chest felt steady, but his heart was beating much faster than usual. Qin Weilan, I told you to wait outside, but you never listen. I looked up, and the smoke stung my eyes, bringing tears to them. Doesn't your highness always refuse to let me stand alone? 2. The chill in his eyes was dispelled by those words. The next moment, he picked me up and rushed out of the east warm pavilion. The courtyard was filled with palace attendants kneeling on the ground. When the empress saw us come out, she let out a long sigh of relief. But before she could speak, Auntie Fong brought someone in. The man was being escorted by guards. His hair was disheveled, and his face was covered in dust. It's Mrs. Liu. She kept bowing her head. I was only following orders when I set the fire. I didn't know there was anything inside. I walked up to her. On whose orders? She looked away. He's the steward of the Prince of Ning's mansion. He's still being held in the Tai Chi Hall. I said coldly. Mrs. Liu began to tremble even more violently. Auntie Fong pulled a handkerchief from her bosom. The pa jiao is embroidered with the orchid patterns commonly used by Qingheng. The empress's expression darkened. Where is Xin Qingheng? A palace attendant hurried in to report. Your Highness. Miss Xin was just escorted back to the side hall, but the window bars in the side hall had been pried open, and the person was gone. I closed my eyes for a moment. She still managed to escape. No. Someone let her go on purpose. Xiao Jingheng opened the silver tube. Hidden inside was a small roll of silk strips. The writing on the silk strip is extremely fine. I leaned in to take a closer look, but all I could see were a few lines of old entries. While the late empress was ill, the biological mother of Prince Ning sent a bronze mirror to the palace under the pretext of praying for her recovery. Incense hidden in the mirror's frame. Fragrances and medicines are incompatible. Prolonged exposure can be harmful to one's health. My fingertips feel cold. It turns out that the bronze mirror wasn't just a piece of evidence. It is proof in and of itself. The Empress turned pale. So back then, the late Empress was seriously ill. It wasn't just the medicine. Xiao Jingheng handed the silk strip to Auntie Fong. Send it to father. No sooner had Aunt Fong taken it than the sound of horse hooves could be heard outside again. Not many people can ride a horse inside the palace gates. The commander of the Yulin Guard dismounted. Covered in dust. Your Highness. Qin Qingheng was taken away by someone in the alleyway west of the palace. The person who took her left a message. If you want the last handwritten letter from Miss Shen's biological mother, have Miss Shen go to the moon-gazing pavilion alone. Xiao Jingheng's hand suddenly tightened. I gazed at the dark palace walls in the distance. Moon-reaching pavilion. It was a tall building next to the coal palace that had been abandoned for many years. It was also the place where the Empress last saw Lin Wan before she passed away. Xiao Jingheng's first words were, "You're not allowed to go." I looked at him. Your Highness knew I would go. His eyes held a storm within them. I know that. Which is exactly why I won't allow it. I whispered. They specifically asked me to go. Alanithi trying to use me to pressure you. But if I don't go, the last things my stepmother left behind will be destroyed. Xiao Jingheng took my hand. The warmth of the Donghuan pavilion still lingered on the palm of his hand. Qin Weilan. The evidence can be examined again. You can't sacrifice yourself. My heart melted. I won't sacrifice myself. I'm going to make them think I will. The Empress spoke from the side. Do you have any ideas? I nodded. What Qin Qingheng has always wanted has never been whether the Prince of Ning wins or loses. What she wants is to step back into the spotlight and prove that she hasn't lost. She won't settle for being just a pawn. Xiao Jingheng looked at me. You want to get her to speak up? Yes. The Prince of Ning has now lost the Taiji Hall, and he has also lost the bronze mirror as evidence. If he really still has a letter written in his concubine's own hand, he'll surely use it as his final bargaining chip. Even in his hands, Qin Qingheng would become nothing more than a final fig leaf. The Empress paused for a moment. The moon-reaching tower is situated in a remote location, making it easy to defend but difficult to attack. Xiao Jingheng said, I'll accompany you with my secret guards. I shook my head. His Highness must not make a public appearance. If the Prince of Ning's men see you, they'll know the plan has been foiled. His expression darkened. I took his hand in a reverse grip. Your Highness, trust me just this once. He looked down at our hands. It was a long time before he said, It's not that I don't believe it. I just can't bring myself to let it go. It felt as if my heart had been lightly scalded. The Empress glanced at us, and her eyes softened slightly. Jingheng, let her go. But people from Fengyi Palace are following us. If even a single hair on her head is harmed, I will have all the rebels in the Moon Pavilion executed as atonement. An hour later, I changed into a palace maid's gown and, draped in a cloak, made my way to the moon-picking pavilion. On the surface, I'm all alone, unbeknownst to them. However, people sent by Xiao Jingheng were following them from the shadows. I have a small whistle tucked into my sleeve. He said that as soon as the whistle blew, he would be there. The moon-reaching pavilion has been abandoned for many years, and the steps are covered with moss. As the night breeze blew, the tattered window paper rustled. When I walked downstairs, Qin Qingheng was standing behind the railing on the second floor. She was still dressed in plain clothes, but her hair was disheveled, and she looked a far cry from her former self. She saw me and smiled. You really did come. I looked up at her. Weren't you just waiting for me, sis? Her smile turned cold. Don't call me sister. You're the future crown princess now. I am not good enough for you. I climbed the stairs one step at a time. You know as well as I do that you didn't give up the position of crown princess for me. A flash of resentment crossed her eyes. If he crown prince hadn't wanted to humiliate me, why would he have chosen you? I stood 3 steps away from her. Even now, you still think the whole world revolves around you. She gritted her teeth. Qin Weilan, you used to be absolutely nothing. All you do is keep your head down and put up with it. Why is it that, overnight, my father fears you, the empress protects you, and the crown prince protects you too? I said calmly. Because I don't use other people's lives as stepping stones. Her eyes welled up with tears. I just want to live a different kind of life. I don't want to spend my whole life confined to the inner quarters like my mother did. I don't want to marry into the Eastern Palace, bowing to people every day and being bound by rules at every turn. I looked at her. Then you can say no, but you shouldn't have made the Shin family take the blame for you. You shouldn't have forged a letter to frame me. And you shouldn't have gone through my mother's old belongings. She suddenly shrieked. The Prince of Ning forced me to do it. He told me that if I refused the marriage, he would make the whole world admire me for my integrity. He also said, as long as you can't enter the Eastern Palace, the Crown Prince will eventually remember me. A thought crossed my mind. So you wrote the fake letter. Her breath caught in her throat. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the shadows behind the building. Idiot. Prince Ning stepped out of the shadows. He had Auntie Gu by his side and was holding a scroll of old silk in his hand. Auntie Gu had a cut on the corner of her mouth. Yet she still stared intently at the old piece of silk. The Prince of Ning looked at me with a chilling smile. Miss Shin too is indeed very brave. It's a pity that no matter how accurate your guesses are, they won't save this old servant, nor will they get Lin Wan's final handwritten note. Shin Qingheng's face turned pale. Your Highness, you said I was only supposed to lead her here. Prince Ning kicked her away. You're no longer of any use. I slowly reached into my sleeve for the small whistle. The Prince of Ning, however, raised his hand and hung the old silk above the candle flame. Blow. If you dare call for help, I'll reduce your mother's last words to ashes. The candlelight danced along the edge of the old silk, and Matron Gu's eyes instantly filled with tears. I didn't blow the whistle. I just looked at the Prince of Ning. If your Highness really wanted to burn it, I would have done so before I went upstairs just now. The only reason you've stayed this long is that you want to try a different path. Prince Ning narrowed his eyes. Qin Weilan, you're quite good at reading people. I took half a step forward. It's not a guess. It's just that the prince looks so much like my sister. They all like to hold others' lives and reputations in their hands, waiting for others to bow down. Qin Qingheng's face turned pale. Prince Ning gave a cold laugh. What I want now is very simple. Come with me out of the palace. If the crown prince dares to pursue me, I will burn this letter. Written in my own hand. I looked at that old silk scroll. The prince used me to threaten his highness, and used the old scroll to threaten me. But you're forgetting one thing. The Prince of Ning's expression darkened slightly. What? I suddenly raised my hand and pulled the jade hairpin from my hair. The tip of the hairpin brushed against her fingertip, and a drop of blood fell to the ground. Qin Qingheng took a step back in fright. Prince Ning also instinctively looked at my hand. At that very moment, Matron Gu suddenly lunged at the Prince of Ning's arm. The candlestick tipped over. The old piece of cloth slipped from between his fingers. I lunged forward and wrapped the old silk in my cloak. A tongue of flame licked the edge of the cloak, burning a charred hole in it. Prince Ning reacted with lightning speed, raising his hand to grab me, but a cold gleam cut through the air from outside the window and struck the ground right at his feet. Xiao Jingheng leaped down from the eaves, his black robe fluttering in the wind, his gaze cold and piercing. Uncle Wang, go ahead and touch her. Prince Ning was furious. How dare you follow me? Xiao Jingheng held me up and shielded me behind him. Not only did I dare to follow you here, but I also dare to ask Uncle Wang to listen to what I just said. He raised his hand. A secret guard dragged a small box up from downstairs. Inside the box lay a phonograph cylinder. The Prince of Ning's expression suddenly changed. I handed the old silk to Auntie Gu and whispered, Auntie, I've kept it safe. Auntie Gu clutched the old silk cloth, her tears falling like rain. Qin Qingheng stared blankly at the bronze cylinder. She suddenly realized that everything she had just admitted that she had been led astray by the Prince of Ning had been recorded. The color gradually drained from her face. Qin Weilan, did you set me up? I looked at her. Sis, if you haven't done anything wrong, I won't be able to trick you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But you know full well that I'm scared. You know full well that I just want to win once. I haven't the slightest bit of compassion in my heart. If you want to win, go out there and win on your own merits. Trampling on my mother's honor. Trampling on the entire Shin family. Trampling on the crown prince's reputation, that's not a victory. This is a debt. Xiao Jingheng asked me in a low voice. Does your hand hurt? I shook my head. But he took out a handkerchief and carefully wrapped it around my fingertip. The Prince of Ning watched the scene and suddenly smiled. What a deeply devoted and loyal couple. It's a pity you think this is the only thing I have left the moon-gazing tower. No sooner had he finished speaking than the sound of a bowstring being drawn suddenly rang out from outside the building. Several rockets flew up and embedded themselves in the window panes. The dry wooden beams burst into flames in an instant. Qin Qingheng let out a scream and rushed toward the stairs. But the staircase was also blocked by the fire. Taking advantage of the commotion, the Prince of Ning grabbed Matron Gu and shoved her toward the window with a backhand. Crown Prince, make your choice. Save her. Or save your crown princess. Xiao Jingheng's eyes hardened, but I had already rushed over. Auntie Gu, clutching the old silk cloth in her arms, was shoved and stumbled backward. I grabbed her sleeve and leaned halfway over the railing. The night breeze swirled up from beneath my feet. The second floor of the moon-reaching tower isn't very high. But it's high enough to break every bone in your body if you fall from it. Xiao Jingheng grabbed my belt. The veins on the back of his hand stood out. And for the first time, anger crept into his voice. Qin Weilan. I gritted my teeth and grabbed Auntie Gu. Save her first. The next moment, the Prince of Ning drew his dagger and stabbed it into Xiao Jingheng's back. Qin Qingheng suddenly lunged forward and clung tightly to the Prince of Ning's arm. The short blade veered half an inch off course, cutting across Xiao Jingheng's shoulder. A crimson hue spread instantly. My heart suddenly tightened. Prince Ning kicked Qin Qingheng away. You idiot! Ignoring his injuries. Xiao Jingheng dragged both me and Auntie Gu back inside the building. The secret guards finally broke through the window. Prince Ning was cornered against the railing. He gazed at the flames below, and a strange smile actually appeared on his face. Xiao Jingheng. I've lost tonight, but don't even think about winning in the end. With that, he actually rolled over and leaped down from the moon-picking tower. The secret guard ran to the railing and called out, Your Highness. There's someone waiting to help you down below. Xiao Jingheng held his shoulder, a deep chill in his eyes. Outside the building, a second urgent report suddenly came from the palace walls in the distance. Your Highness. Remnants of the Prince of Ning's forces have broken into the imperial prison and abducted Lady Shin. By the time the fire at Moon-reaching Pavilion had been extinguished, the sky was already beginning to lighten. Xiao Jingheng's shoulder wound wasn't deep, but he lost quite a bit of blood. The court physician knelt beside him, bandaging his wounds, while I stood by the window, having the wound on my fingertip redressed. He glanced at me. Come here. I didn't move, Your Highness. Please have the court physician dress the wound properly first. His tone softened. If you don't come to me, I'll never get better. The imperial physician's hand trembled, and he lowered his head, pretending not to have heard. Auntie Fong also turned her face away, unable to suppress the smile playing at the corners of her lips. My ears felt a little warm, so I had no choice but to walk over to him. Xiao Jingheng reached out with his uninjured hand and gently took hold of my wrist. Don't ever use yourself as bait again. I looked at the white cloth draped over his shoulder. Your Highness must not shield me from the blade again. He chuckled softly. I'll do my best. It's not just as much as possible. It's a must. He looked up at me, and the coldness in his eyes faded away, leaving only tenderness. All right. I'll do as the crown princess says. I felt a wave of warmth in my chest. Auntie Fong cleared her throat. Your Highness, young lady, His Majesty requests your presence. Order has been restored in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Most of Prince Ning's remaining forces were captured, and the palace gates were sealed off once again. However, the kidnapping of Lady Shin made it clear to everyone that the Prince of Ning had not yet completely stopped his activities. The emperor sat on the throne, his expression even colder than it had been that night. Qin Huizhang knelt in the hall. Overnight. He looked 10 years older. Qin Qingheng was also brought back under guard. Her hair was in disarray, and there was still dust on her sleeves. If she hadn't held off Prince Ning at the moon-reaching pavilion, Xiao Jingheng's injuries would likely have been even more severe. But that doesn't make up for what she's done in the past. The emperor looked at her. Qin Qingheng, do you have anything else to say? Qin Qingheng knelt on the ground. Her voice hoarse. Your servant is guilty. The fake letter was written by this humble maiden, and the people at the Prince of Ning's mansion forged it to look like a genuine letter. Mrs. Liu was someone my mother asked me to find. My daughter is also aware of the transfer of the deed for the shop on South Street. With every word she spoke, Qin Huizhang's back bent a little more. I listened quietly. Qin Qingheng looked up at me. But your humble daughter never intended to tarnish concubine Lin's reputation. That fake letter about his background was added by the Prince of Ning at the last minute. I admit I'm jealous of you and resent you, but I never thought of setting a trap involving a woman's virtue. Tears rolled down her cheeks. This time, it wasn't the kind of vulnerability she put on for others. Rather, it was the desperation of having truly lost all means of support. I didn't speak up for her. Xiao Jingheng spoke up. She managed to delay Prince Ning for a moment at the moon-picking pavilion. This is worth noting, the emperor said calmly. Merit is merit. Guilt is guilt. Qin Qingheng seized another's estate, forged letters, and colluded with the prince's household. Though she did not participate in the military uprising, she provided the rebels with the means to carry out their plot. Strip him of his titles and rewards. He is to reflect on his wrongdoing in his family temple and may not return to the capital without an imperial decree. Qin Qingheng staggered. The reputation she had painstakingly built over many years was now completely shattered. Life at the family temple was austere, and it was 1,000 li away from the capital. For her, it was even more agonizing than being locked up in prison. But she didn't protest her innocence anymore. She just looked at me and whispered, Qin Weilan. I still don't accept it. I looked at her. Then live your life to the fullest. Even if you don't accept it. When you finally realize that people don't rise by putting others down, maybe you can start over. She froze, and her tears suddenly began to fall even more heavily. Qin Huizhang threw himself to the ground, begging for mercy. Your Majesty. Qingheng was young and foolish. I beg for your Majesty's mercy. The emperor looked at him. His gaze so intense it sent a chill down one's spine. Now you know what to ask for. Where were you when Lin Wan was being treated so coldly at the Shin residence? Qin Huizhang's face turned pale. Auntie Gu stepped forward, holding the old piece of silk. The old piece of silk was unfurled. It was a handwritten note left by Lin Wan on his deathbed. She didn't blame anyone. She simply wrote, when my daughter grows up, I hope she will never look down on herself. May she distinguish right from wrong and never bow her head in front of others. May she, if she meets a good man, have the courage to entrust herself to him. The last sentence is written in a very understated manner. My little one, Weilan. Mom won't be able to be with you as you grow up. But remember, you are not anyone's leftovers, nor are you anyone's fallback plan. As I looked at those words, I finally couldn't hold back my tears. Xiao Jingheng took my hand. The emperor remained silent for a long time. Lin Wan was posthumously conferred the rank of 5th-rank female clerk and granted a burial in the side garden of the imperial mausoleum. Qin Weilan, his only daughter, inherited all of his former estate. Qin Huizhang is suspended from duty, pending further investigation into the old case involving the Shin family. Qin Huizhang collapsed onto the ground. I knelt down to express my gratitude. But suddenly, footsteps could be heard outside the hall. The commander of the Imperial Guard entered the hall to report. Your Majesty, the Prince of Ning has sent a letter. He said Mrs. Qin was in his custody. If he isn't allowed to leave the city before noon today, he'll reveal to the public everything Mrs. Qin has been hiding all these years. The emperor gave a cold laugh. Why bother paying any attention to the words of a rebel? The commander of the Imperial Guard hesitated for a moment. The letter also mentioned that Mrs. Qin had a personal ledger. It lists the names of those who delivered incense to the palace as part of the late empress's medical records from back then. The empress suddenly gripped the armrest tig. HTLY. Xiao Jingheng's gaze also turned cold. The Prince of Ning kidnapped he sure not to save her. That's to settle the score with the one who can bite more people. I looked up. Your Majesty. I humbly request permission to leave the palace and return to the Shin residence. Xiao Jingheng immediately looked at me. I whispered. If that ledger really is at the Shin residence, the only person likely to have hidden it is Mrs. Hein, a place she thinks no one would dare to look. There was only one place she thought no one would dare to search. Qin Qingheng's bedchamber. Qin Qingheng looked up suddenly, her face alarmingly pale. Her voice trembled. In my room. Just then, another urgent report came from outside the hall. There's a fire at the Shin residence. It's Miss Shin's courtyard that's on fire. The fire at the Shin residence was even more intense than the one at Fenyi Palace. By the time we arrived, a crowd had already gathered outside Qingheng courtyard. The servants in the mansion were running back and forth carrying water, and the cries and shouts formed a chaotic din. Qin Huizhang was escorted back by the imperial guards. When he saw the flames shooting skyward in the courtyard, his legs gave way and he nearly fell to his knees. My mansion. My mansion. No one paid any attention to him. Xiao Jingheng had an injury on his shoulder, but he dismounted anyway. He looked at me. Wait here. I looked up. He was halfway through his sentence when he sighed again. Never mind. I know you won't wait. I couldn't help but smile. Your Highness understands me better and better. He handed me a damp cloth. Then at least cover your mouth and nose. Half of the main hall at Qingheng courtyard had already burned down. The fire started in the inner room. Clearly, someone had come earlier to destroy the accounts. Qin Qingheng was led out of the courtyard by the guards, her face deathly pale. She looked at the house where she had lived for many years and suddenly collapsed to the floor. My poetry manuscript. My guitar. My painting. She muttered, as if she had lost her soul. I glanced at her. Even now, these are still the things my sister thinks about most. She looked up, her face streaming with tears. Shin Weilon, you don't understand. That's what proves I'm not just an ordinary person. I said, if one wants to prove oneself, there's no need to rely on pretentious words on paper, and one certainly shouldn't rely on stolen silver to maintain a respectable lifestyle. She shuddered and was unable to speak another word. Auntie Fong led the palace attendants through the side gate into the back courtyard. I followed her and soon found the small room next to Shin Qingheng's bedroom. That was where she usually kept her old books. If the He family were to keep a secret account, they certainly wouldn't do so openly. She hides in the things that seem the cleanest. I had someone move the bookshelf aside, then tapped on the wall. A hollow sound came from the east wall. The guard pried it open with a single stroke of his blade. And sure enough, a secret compartment was revealed inside. There is an iron box in the secret compartment. The iron box bore the He family's private seal. Qin Qingheng's face turned ashen. Mom actually hid the things in my room. I looked at her. Over the years, she has given you a respectable life, but she has also planted the seeds of your downfall right at your feet. The iron box was quickly opened. Inside were ledgers, banknotes, and a few letters. On the oldest page of the ledger were the names of several palace procurement officers from 12 years ago. One of them was a servant from the former palace of the Prince of Ning's biological mother. Xiao Jingheng turned 2 pages, his eyes darkening. That's enough. The Prince of Ning won't be able to make a comeback this time. But I saw a jade pendant at the bottom of the box. The jade pendant does not belong to the He family, nor is it Shin Qingheng's. I've seen that jade pendant before. There used to be an OLD painting hanging in Shin Huizhang's study, and the figure in the painting wore the exact same sash around his waist. The person in the painting is neither the emperor nor the Prince of Ning. It is the Duke of Anghua, who has been staying indoors, claiming to be ill. My heart skipped a beat. Your Highness, there's someone else behind this. Xiao Jingheng took the jade pendant, and his expression changed slightly. The Duke of Anghua's mansion. Qin Huizhang suddenly burst in from outside. When he saw the jade pendant, he looked as if he had seen a ghost. Can't check. Waylon. We can't investigate this any further. I turned to look at him. Why can't we check? Qin Huizhang's lips trembled. The Duke of Anhua is a veteran statesman who has served 3 reigns, and his disciples are found throughout the imperial court. If he's exposed, the Qin family will be crushed. I suddenly found it funny. Even now. My father is still afraid of the Qin family. You were afraid when your stepmother was murdered. When I'm being bullied, you're afraid. Now that the old case is about to come to light, you're still afraid. Qin Huizhang's eyes were red and teary. I was just trying to protect you. 2. I shook my head. You've never been protecting me. It's your own official cap. He staggered backward. Xiao Jingheng tucked the jade pendant into his sleeve. His voice cold. Magistrate Qin. There's no need to be afraid. If the Qin family is innocent, no one can crush them. If the Qin family isn't innocent, then it deserves to be torn apart. Qin Huizhang slumped to the ground, completely exhausted. Just then, the sound of galloping hooves could be heard from outside. The commander of the Yulin Guard led his men as they stormed into the courtyard. Your Highness. The Prince of Ning is surrounded in the western part of the city, but the Duke of Kanan's mansion suddenly opened its gates and sent out its garrison troops to provide backup. Xiao Jingheng's gaze instantly turned as cold as ice. The Duke of Anhua has finally met his end. I clutched the ledger in my hand. The firelight shone on the pages, and the names looked like a series of open mouths. A 12-year-old cold case has finally been traced to its true source. Qin Jingheng suddenly grabbed the hem of my skirt. Take me there. I looked down at her. She lifted her tear-streaked face. I know my mother has an identification token F. Ron, the Duke of Anhua's household. If she's taken away by the Prince of Ning, that's most likely where she'll be sent. Qin Weilon. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but this time, I want to pull my mother out of the trap she set herself. I looked at her for a long time. Xiao Jingheng said softly, It's up to you. The fire in the courtyard gradually subsided, but in the night sky to the west of the city, a new glow of fire appeared. I bent down and pried Qin Jingheng's hand open. If you want to atone for your sins, get back on your feet. Stop begging on your knees. She paused for a moment, then slowly stood up, holding on to the door frame. We had just stepped out of Qingheng courtyard when a fast horse from the palace arrived. The man turned over and knelt on the ground, his voice hoarse with urgency. Your Highness. His Majesty has been assassinated. The assassin left a token from the Duke of Anhua's mansion. Her Majesty the Empress requests that your Highness return to the palace immediately. On the way back to the palace, Xiao Jingheng spoke only one sentence. I'll leave the western part of the city to the Yulin Guard. I'll return to the palace first. I held the ledger in my hands, and the pages dug into my fingertips, making them ache. I'll return with His Highness. He looked at me. Qin Jingheng recognized the identification token from the Duke of Anhua's mansion. If you return to the palace, the line of communication to the west of the city might be cut off. I understand what he means. With the Empress presiding over the palace and the imperial physicians already at His Majesty's side, things may not have reached the worst possible point. But once the Duke of Qin leaves the capital with the Prince of Ning, both the poisoning case from 12 years ago and today's rebellion will be pinned on a few dead men. Qin Jingheng stood outside the carriage, her face still pale. But she did not step back any further. I'm going to the west side of town. If my mother were still alive, I could make her speak. Xiao Jingheng looked at her coldly. You'd better remember that you're allowed to go not because you're innocent. Qin Jingheng lowered her eyes. I know. I handed the ledger to Auntie Fong and asked her to take it back to the palace. He slipped the jade pendant F. Ron, the Duke of Anhua's mansion back into his sleeve. Xiao Jingheng gripped my wrist and whispered, Don't try to be a hero. I looked at the bandage on his shoulder, which hadn't quite dried yet. The same goes for your Highness. He bent down and tied the straps of my cloak for me. Amid the flickering flames and the darkness of the night, his gaze was so steady it seemed capable of withstanding any storm. Wait for me. Once this matter is settled, I will come personally to take you back to the East Palace. I nodded. I'll bring the real books back. 2. The sound of hooves split into 2 directions. Xiao Jingheng ran toward the palace gates. Qin Qingheng and I followed the imperial guard straight to the Duke of Xian's mansion in the city. The main gate of the Duke of Anhua's mansion was tightly shut. Yet the light from lanterns flickered along the mansion walls. The commander of the imperial guard ordered the gate to be opened. No one answered from inside the door. A moment later, an arrow flew down from the top of the wall and lodged itself at our feet. The commander immediately drew his sword. Surround the mansion. I raised my hand to stop him. Don't attack just yet. Qin Qingheng looked at me. Are you afraid of hurting my mother? I said in a calm voice. I'm afraid they'll kill me in the chaos. I had the jade pendant from the Duke of Anhua's mansion brought to the front gate. Tell the people inside that if Mrs. Qin is still alive, have her come out and say a few words. After the message was relayed, there was finally some movement from inside the door. After half a cup of tea, the gate opened a crack. Qi was pushed out. Her hair was disheveled. There were handprints on her face, and a knife was pressed against her back. Qin Qingheng cried out, "Mother!" When Ms. Qi saw her, tears immediately welled up in her eyes. "Qingheng, save me." The person behind the door let out a cold laugh. "Miss Shen, hand over the ledger and the jade pendant. Otherwise, Mrs. Shen will have to stay here tonight." I looked at the He family. "Madam, you've been covering up the Duke of An's household's financial irregularities all these years, and now they're trading your life for those records. Don't you find that ridiculous?" Qi's sobbing came to a halt. She averted her gaze, not daring to look at me. Qin Qingheng gritted her teeth and said, "Mother, what else is there between us?" Qi's lips trembled. "I can't say. I told you. Your maternal grandparents' family is doomed." That's when I finally understood. Qi sure doesn't act solely for his own sake. Her family had long since been tied to the Duke of Anhua's household. The people inside grew impatient, and the blades pressed forward. A trickle of blood immediately began to seep from his neck. Qin Qingheng suddenly took a step forward. "I'll take her place." Qi widened her eyes. "Qingheng." Qin Qingheng gave a bitter smile. "Mother, you gave me dignity, but you also hid my sins in my room. This time, I'll go in for you." The person inside seemed to be swayed. Just as the gate opened another half-chi, Qin Qingheng suddenly raised her hand and thrust the white jade hairpin hidden in her sleeve forcefully into the back of the kidnapper's hand. The man cried out in pain and let go. At the same time, the Yulin guard burst through the door. I grabbed Ms. Qi and pulled her back. A flash of steel swept past my eyes. Qi fell to the ground, trembling all over. The ledger is in the Buddha Hall. The Duke of Anhua's private ledgers detailing the incense, medicine, and people he has sent to the palace over the years are all hidden inside the base of the gilded Buddha statue in the chapel. I looked at her. "You're finally willing to talk, Ms." He burst into tears. But before the imperial guards could charge toward the Buddhist hall, flames suddenly erupted from deep within the Duke of Anhua's mansion. Someone shouted, "The Buddhist hall is on fire." When the fire broke out in the Buddhist hall, chaos reigned at the Duke of Anhua's mansion. The imperial guard rushed in to put out the fire, and I ran after them toward the backyard. Qin Qingheng grabbed my sleeve. "The fire is too big." I pushed her away. If the accounts were destroyed, the Prince of Ning and the Duke of Anhua might still retract their confessions. She gritted her teeth and, to her surprise, followed him. Thick smoke billowed outside the Buddhist hall. The curtain in front of the golden statue was already ablaze, with flames licking up the beams and columns. The commander ordered his men to splash water on the window to break it. As I looked at the half-man-tall golden statue, I thought of what Ms. Qi had said about the pedestal. The base isn't made of wood. It's made of stone. If the fire hasn't spread all the way through, move the altar aside first. Two members of the Imperial Guard charged in but were quickly forced back by the smoke. Qingheng suddenly tore off her outer robe, soaked it in water, and draped it over herself. She glanced at me. "I'll pay back part of what I owe myself." Before I could say a word, she had already rushed into the Buddhist hall. My heart skipped a beat. The next moment, Xiao Jingheng's voice came from behind him. "Qin Weilan." I spun around. He actually showed up. The bandage on his shoulder was once again stained with blood. Yet his face was ice cold. "Didn't I tell you to wait for me?" I looked at him, covered in dust from his journey. "How is His Majesty?" "He was wounded in the arm. And the assassin has been apprehended. The token belongs to the Duke of Anhua's mansion. And the assassin is also one of the Duke of Anhua's loyal retainers." He walked over to me and lowered his voice. "Once I've taken care of matters in the palace, I'll come to pick you up." My eyes welled up, and I immediately pointed toward the Buddha hall. Shin Qingheng went inside. Xiao Jingheng frowned and immediately ordered his secret guards to enter. The fire was getting bigger and bigger. A moment later, Shin Qingheng was dragged out by the secret guards. She clutched a charred bronze box tightly to her chest. A section of her hair was singed off, and the back of her hand was covered in burns. He rushed over, crying and wailing. My son, Shin Qingheng, however, did not look at her. She pushed the brass box to my feet. "It's inside. There's a second layer inside the base, none of them know about it." I opened the brass box. It contains more than just personal accounts. There are also secret letters exchanged between the Duke of Anhua and the Prince of Ning. The letter states that the Prince of Ning's biological mother used a bronze mirror to conceal incense at the time, while the Duke of Anhua was responsible for procuring it from outside the palace. And the imperial court's pharmacist assisted in altering the medicine. After the late empress fell seriously ill, Lin Wan uncovered a lead and was ordered to leave the palace to present evidence. After Shin Huizhang rescued Lin Wan, the Duke of Anhua originally intended to silence her. But because the emperor was watching too closely, he had no choice but to let the He family gradually seize the Shin family's assets, cut off their connections, and silence them from within the Shin residence. I clutched the letter, my knuckles turning white. Xiao Jingheng reached out and placed his hand over the back of mine. "Weilon. That's enough." I shook my head. "We're still one person short. Duke of Anhua." No sooner had he finished speaking than the sound of fighting broke out outside the mansion. The commander of the Imperial Guard strode forward. "Your Highness." The Duke of Anhua led Prince Ning to escape through a secret passage, but they were intercepted by the city garrison and have now retreated to the rear garden. Xiao Jingheng said coldly, "Lead the way." Near the rockery in the back garden, the Duke of Anhua finally made an appearance. Although he was over 60, he was still dressed in court robes, and there was not a trace of disarray in his demeanor. The Prince of Ning stood beside him, his robe stained with blood, his eyes filled with venomous hatred. When the Duke of Anhua saw Xiao Jingheng, he let out only a soft sigh. "Your Highness, the Crown Prince is still young. Why go so far as to exterminate them all?" Xiao Jingheng held up the secret letter. "He harmed the late Empress Dowager, plotted a rebellion and attempted a palace coup, and attempted to assassinate His Majesty. Which of these matters, in your Grace's opinion, can be simply brushed aside?" The Duke of Anhua smiled. "Those who accomplish great deeds cannot avoid casualties." I took a step forward. "So Lin Wan deserves to die. The late Empress deserves to die. And everyone you've dragged into this deserves to die." The Duke of Anhua looked at me as if I were a speck of dust. If Lin Wanrua had just kept her place as a concubine, she might have lived a few more years. Xiao Jingheng suddenly drew the long sword from its sheath, but I stopped him. "Your Highness, let him speak." I looked at the Duke of An. "You've never been afraid of your stepmother. You're afraid of the evidence she left behind, afraid that a woman you look down on will one day reduce your entire family's power and influence to ashes." The Duke of Anhua's expression finally darkened. Prince Ning suddenly burst out laughing. "Qin Weilon, do you think just because you got the letter, you've won?" The Duke of Anhua's disciples are all over the imperial court. If you dare lay a finger on him, chaos will erupt in the court tomorrow. Xiao Jingheng said calmly. "Then let's clear them all out." The sound of hooves could be heard again in the distance. The emperor's personal guard rushed in, carrying bright yellow signal flags. The chief eunuch proclaimed the imperial edict in a loud voice. The Duke of Anhua colluded with the rebel prince, plotted to murder the late empress, and attempted to assassinate His Majesty. The evidence is irrefutable. Immediately imprison him and refer the case to the 3 departments for a joint trial. The Prince of Ning has been stripped of his title, imprisoned in the imperial prison. and will be tried and sentenced. The last trace of color drained from Prince Ning's face. The Duke of Anhua stared at Xiao Jingheng and suddenly drew a dagger from his sleeve. He didn't stab the crown prince. Instead, it stabbed me. It's all because of you. You remnant of the Lin clan, you've ruined my grand plan. Xiao Jingheng stepped forward to shield me. A flash of sword light. The dagger fell to the ground. The Duke of Anhua's wrist was covered in blood. He fell to his knees and was held down firmly by the imperial bodyguards. Xiao Jingheng turned to look at me. Are you hurt? I shook my head. No. Yet he still held my hand tightly, as if to make sure I was really standing right in front of him. Just then, Qin Qingheng suddenly knelt down in front of us. She rested her forehead against the ground. Her voice hoarse didn't sound like her at all. Qin Weilan. I plead guilty. I'd like to testify as well. I only ask that you let my mother live to stand trial. At daybreak, a light rain fell over the capital. It wasn't that biting cold rain you find in front of the palace gates, but rather the spring rain that washes away the smoke and dust. The Prince of Ning and the Duke of Anhua were taken to the imperial prison, and the 3 departments conducted an overnight investigation. The secret letters, private ledgers, and medical records seized by the imperial bodyguard from the Duke of Anhua's residence filled no fewer than 6 trunks. The next day, all those who had spoken on behalf of Prince Ning in the imperial court knelt outside the palace gates to beg for forgiveness. The emperor did not execute him immediately. He simply instructed the Ministry of Justice to investigate each case one by one and examine each entry in detail. Xiao Jingheng said, the realm cannot be brought to order by a momentary outburst of anger. We must ensure that the charges are set in writing and enshrined in the law, so that future generations can never overturn the verdict. As I listened, I suddenly understood why he was able to become the crown prince. He is sharp, yet he knows his limits. He felt anger, but did not indiscriminately kill the innocent. After the case involving the former empress's medication was re-examined, Lin Wan's name was officially recorded in the palace's historical archives. She was no longer just a concubine who had died young in the Shen household. Rather, she was a female attendant who loyally protected the late empress. The emperor personally issued an edict ordering that a stele be erected in her honor. The inscription was written in the hand of Xiao Jingheng. His loyal remains lie buried in the dust, but his noble reputation lives on. I stood in front of the monument and finally finished reading that farewell letter. Weilan, my son, may you never look down on yourself. May you never be a spare part in someone else's life, nor anyone's fallback option. May you never doubt yourself when you meet others, and never back down when faced with challenges. If one day the wind and rain come, remember that your mother once hoped you would stand in the light. I pressed the letter to my chest, and tears fell. But I no longer felt wronged, because I know that from now on, no one will ever be able to push me back into the shadows again. Qin Huizhang has been suspended from duty pending an investigation, although he had no involvement in the medicine scandal. He failed to carry out the emperor's orders and allowed the imperial harem to embezzle Lin Wan's former property. As a result, he was demoted 2 ranks and transferred out of the capital to a non-essential post. Before he left, he came to see me. In just a few days, his temples had turned gray. Weilan, I'm so sorry to you and your mother. I looked at him, and the bitter longing I once felt for a sense of justice had vanished from my heart. There's more my father should have said than just I'm sorry. You should remember that it was your silence that allowed others' malice to grow. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he bowed deeply to me. This time, I didn't help him up. He was sentenced to exile. Before she left, she tearfully pleaded with Qin Qingheng. Qin Qingheng wore a plain hairpin, and the back of her hand still bore red marks from a burn. She knelt in front of the prison van and kowtowed 3 times to Mrs. Qi. Mother, your daughter will copy the sutras for you, but my daughter can no longer plead not guilty on your behalf. Ms. Qi wept her heart out. Qin Qingheng, however, did not look back. On the day she was sent to the family temple, no one in the capital came to see her off. Even those poet friends who had once praised her for having the grace and integrity of bamboo had all shut themselves away. She stood beside the carriage and glanced at me from a distance. Qin Weilan, I still envy you. I said. Then let's turn that admiration into a skill. Don't let it turn into resentment. She stood there in silence for a long time, then whispered, "All right." The carriage gradually grew more and more distant. I don't know if she'll really turn her life around in the future, but that's no longer my burden to bear. 3 months later, the crown prince's wedding took place. Family Palace personally prepared my wedding trousseau. The empress held my hand and smiled, saying, "I had thought you would have to learn a great many rules." It wasn't until later that I realized the true rule is to have a pure heart. When Xiao Jinghen came to his bride, his black formal attire made his features look like a painting. He reached out his hand to me in front of the entire audience. This time, there was no rain, no pressure, and no one backed down. He looked at me, his voice clear and bright. "Qin Weilan, I have come to marry you." I placed my hand in the palm of his hand. "I, your humble daughter, am willing to marry." He smiled gently. "It is not this humble servant. It is my wife." 10 li of red silk lined the main street of the Eastern Palace. The common people stood by the roadside watching the spectacle, and some began to whisper about the wedding swap that had taken place at the palace gates that day. Yet amid the discussions, there was no longer any trace of contempt or mockery. Nothing but words of envy. Second mission is truly blessed. As I sat in the wedding palanquin and heard those words, I couldn't help but smile. I haven't been lucky in life. In the end, I didn't let others write my life story. That night, after the wedding toast, Xiao Jinghen removed my phoenix crown for me. His fingertips brushed against my temple, moving so gently as if he were afraid of disturbing a dream. "Are you tired?" I shook my head. "Where is His Highness?" He smiled. "Waiting for this day isn't tiring." As the candlelight flickered, he suddenly pulled a small jade button from his sleeve. That was a new clasp carved to match the old jade of the late Empress Dowager. The character Lan was engraved on the back. "Here you go." I clutched the jade clasp, feeling a slight warmth in my eyes. "Did your highness give me this so that I would always keep it with me?" He leaned closer and whispered, "I want you to remember that from now on. You have the Eastern Palace behind you and me, too." I looked up at him. "Then your highness must remember that, too. I'm right here with you." The smile in his eyes grew deeper and deeper. "Okay." The rain stopped outside the window, and moonlight streamed into the new home. I finally stood in the light. It has finally become a place to call home.